Okay, everybody, as they say, don't touch that dial. Leave it right here on TVO all night long. We're going to have the best coverage. We're going to have all results all the time. And remember, we never interrupt for commercials here. So stick with us all night long. We've got the best panelists anywhere on television this evening who are going to help you understand what's transpiring in the province of Ontario this evening. Yes, I'm putting the pressure on all of you right now to be fantastic. Before we introduce the gang here in the studio, though, I want to put tonight's election in perspective, into historical perspective, because history has a lot to do with what could be made this evening. Michael Smith, if you would, let's start to roll these pictures. Why are we showing you a picture of Leslie Frost? Well, because Leslie Frost was the last Premier of Ontario 52 years ago to win back-to-back-to-back majority governments. Hasn't been done in more than half a century, and that's what Dalton McGinty is trying to do tonight. Next picture, please. That's William Davis. Why are we showing you William Davis? Because it was 40 years ago, actually this month, 40 years ago, that the last rookie leader of a political party in this province won a majority government. And that's what Tim Hudak and Andrea Horvath are trying to do tonight. Next picture, please. Look at this trifecta. This is a Tory trifecta. Remember Stephen Harper earlier this summer said he's going for the Tory hat trick? Well, you've got to go back to 1962 when John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister, John Robarts was the Premier of Ontario, and that's Nathan Phillips on the right. He was the Mayor of Toronto, after whom, of course, they named that square. That's the last time, almost again, half a century ago, that the Tories turned the trifecta, turned the hat trick in Parliament, at Queen's Park, and at Toronto City Hall. And of course, if Tim Hudak does that tonight by winning, we'll have a Tory hat trick for the first time in almost half a century. Now, stick with me on this one. Oliver Mowat, James Pliny Whitney, G. Howard Ferguson, George Drew, there's the Colonel, and one more, William Davis. Why are we showing you these pictures? Because each one of these premiers, having won 2 terms, went for a third and got it. In fact, never in Ontario history has a 2-term premier seeking re-election failed to gain re-election. And don't think the Liberals don't know that. Dalton McGinty hopes again to have his picture be part of that list. A 2-term premier vying for a 3rd term and getting it, as every 2-term premier in this province's history has done. So, with that historical context put into place, let's introduce 66 years of elective experience around this table, starting with a 34-year veteran of the Progressive Conservative Party, former cabinet minister and MPP, Norm Sterling. 24-year veteran of the New Democratic Party, its former leader, Howard Hampton. 8-year veteran of the Liberal Party, former chief of staff to Dalton McGinty, former cabinet minister, Minnick Smith. You're a piker compared to those two. Someone who wishes she was part of that group, the former deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario, Victoria Serta, and features writer and for 3 decades a Queen's Park reporter and columnist, the Toronto Star's Jim Coyle. And a reminder, our Your Vote editor, Mike Miner, is hosting a live chat at yourvote2011.ca, so please go online, watch the results at yourvote2011.ca throughout the evening. And if you're in downtown Toronto, you can join Mike and other agenda producers at the Ossington, that's his favorite neighborhood hangout, where you can watch the results on 2 giant screens and chat about what's happening with people in the know who can explain why it's happening, all in a fun social setting. So if you're in downtown Toronto, check out the Ossington. You'll have a good time there as well. Okay, everybody, welcome. It's good to see you all around the table here. And we invited you 3 tonight because you were all in the last legislature. You all decided not to stand for Parliament again. Some cases by choice, in some cases not by choice. Norm Sterling's laughing already. I want to go around the table here in the time we have before 9 o'clock comes and we get the torrential downpour of results, to get your opinion on the last question that I asked. Norm, we'll go in order of precedence here. Norm Sterling, how well were citizens served by what's transpired over the past 30 days?
How well are they? I don't think they were well served.
Why not?
Well, I don't think any issues were really discussed. I don't think that there was a good debate on issue. And we got sidetracked on really smaller and less important issues.
What did we get sidetracked on?
Well, we got sidetracked on the grant for new Canadians. That took about a week out of the campaign.
The so-called foreign workers thing.
Yes. We got sidetracked on some of the literature that people were handing out. We got sidetracked on very minor stuff.
So the big stuff didn't get covered.
Yeah. I expect the vote to be light tonight. because I think there's a lot of people who are going to say, I don't want any one of the three.
Howard Hampton, how well were voters served by the campaign that just transpired?
Oh, I think it was a vigorous campaign. I think a lot of people I've heard complain that they didn't feel that the issues that really needed to be addressed got addressed. And I'll go back to something I said a few weeks ago. 53% of Ontarians are now living paycheck to paycheck. They're really in danger of sort of falling into very difficult economic circumstances.
Where's that number come from?
Stats Can. And yet there was very little discussion of really just how difficult the economy's been for all kinds of people. I wish there had been more discussion of that. But I think the campaign has been a campaign in the sense that things changed. Things moved during the campaign. So obviously people did get engaged.
Minnick Smith.
Yeah, I think, to your point of what you were talking about in the previous segment, a lot of the issues that were raised at your town halls as being the issues people wanted to discuss weren't actually discussed. And I think that your panel of journalists commented on that and took some responsibility for not kind of taking the ball and running with it. But I think that there were a number of issues that didn't come to the fore. I think that our platform was certainly put out there and, attacked from both sides, but I'm not really sure that the other sides were very clear in putting forward their program, which I don't think provided the general populace an opportunity to make an informed decision on what was being offered. I will actually agree with Norm.
You're allowed to
maybe
do that.
once
That's
or
okay.
twice tonight, and this will be the first one. Mark it on my little tab. But I do think that there was a fairly high level of disengagement. I have to say, when I was out knocking on doors, talking to people, it wasn't just undecided. It was more
not interested.
Not really interested. Yeah.
Victoria, how would you answer that question? How well served were the voters by what transpired over the last 30 days?
I think that the issues weren't talked about enough that were meaningful to people, just as you found, and it caused a lot of disillusionment and people just not wanting to vote. So I expect we'll get a record low turnout again.
Below 50%, maybe?
I think around 50%,
Around
probably,
50.
yeah.
Okay. Jim Coyle?
I agree with the consensus here, but I think I wouldn't put the blame all on the politicians and the campaigns. I think the media actually have to look at how we cover these things. The business of cocooning our best reporters now with leaders to go around at these utterly and entirely scripted provincial tours for 4 or 5 weeks where they rarely encounter uncommitted voters and go through ridiculous charades, like how much Tim Hortons coffee can Tim Hudak drink? These are artificial synthetic events. And I think we'd be a lot better off sort of arranging a lot more of the kind of community forums or sending our reporters out to speak to electors about what they'd like to see than following the leaders around and listening to the kind of cautious campaign things where they say just as little as they can get away with, without being pinned down.
Howard, let me follow up with you on that, because you were the leader of the NDP. You led them into 3 election campaigns, and my recollection was you didn't campaign in a bubble. You're out there, you're meeting whoever, wherever, whatever you needed to do to get people to vote for you.
When you're leader of the NDP, you never campaign in a bubble.
Okay. What do you make of the fact that, Mr. McGinty did it the most, Tim Hudak did it a lot, Andrea Horvath didn't do it much at all, frankly. What do you make of the fact that this seems to be the new reality when leaders campaign nowadays?
Well, I think it's the new reality if the media allows it. And I actually, think Mr. Coyle is onto something.
Howard, you're not going to agree with me, right?
Strange as it seems, maybe just for a few seconds.
I'm scared consensus is breaking out all over the place here.
If the media allows basically, what you'd call canned election programs, without going beyond it and without, saying, look, this is really not engaging in a debate or a discussion the public needs to see, then I think it'll be tougher. But if the media is willing to go along with that,
Well, what could we do about it?
well, I think Jim's right. I think just following the leaders around and not sort of engaging in the kinds of questions and debates and discussions that are really happening at the community level. I know in my part of the province, where the unemployment rate is just unbelievable.
Northwestern Ontario.
Northwestern Ontario. So many people have lost their job in the forest sector, and yet the issue barely was touched, okay, by the leaders in their campaigns. Barely was touched. I think there are a lot of people in my part of the province who are pretty frustrated.
What would be the reaction, Norm, if if media just decided, you know what, we're not going to staff the leaders' buses. You guys go off and do your silly little photo ops in front of, you know, every fake background you want. We're not coming. What would be the reaction?
Well, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I mean, it's too easy for them to make news on the leaders' bus, whether it's canned or it's not canned. And that's the easy route out, and that's the easy route that the press are going to take. I thought, you know, quite frankly, the editorial boards do a service. In Ottawa, the local papers review each candidate, and then they put that on a video that you can get on the internet, as well as they report the results. I like the editorial board review of the leaders, because they do cross-examine them on the issues at that time.
You sticking with that view, even though most of the editorial boards in this province came out for the Liberals?
Well, I'm just saying the process.
Okay.
The process is good, and I think that we need to do more of that kind of thing, where there is an intelligent discussion and an intelligent cross-examination of candidates on the important issues.
Monique, where are you on this?
Well, I think I agree with Jim, which I will do probably many times, but I also think that not only just the tour coverage, but it's the tour coverage combined with the polling coverage. I mean, it just seems we went from one poll result to the next, and that was the story. Well, polls are supposed to reflect, you know, what we're talking about, what we're thinking, but if you're only telling us what we're thinking because of the results of the poll, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit, and I don't know that we're actually getting into a discussion about anything substantive. So I just think there just seemed to be more and more polls in this campaign, and they were coming out fast and furious, and that seemed to be what was spurring any kind of discussion.
And often disagreeing with
It's
each
the
other.
oddest kind of campaign in the sense that it's occurred at a time when there's high anxiety, and the middle class has a tremendous fear of falling now.
Yeah.
And there's high anxiety, there's economic turbulence on the horizon. And it seems as though nothing of significance happened during the campaign or was addressed. It's kind of bizarre in its own way. And nothing happened till the debate, and everyone went, okay. Then we agreed nothing happened at the debate. Nothing seems to have happened since the debate.
Victoria?
Well, no one from the public is really demanding a response from their politicians, though. I mean, in my world, in a grassroots participatory democracy, you'd have people you'd have them showing up at the debates with the politicians, and the candidates would actually show up too. Like, there's an internal culture among a lot of politicians where they don't think that going to a little community debate is important anymore. It's just a place for political hacks, and it's always the same old people showing up. But if people actually came to those debates and demanded responses from the people, they would get a lot better idea of what was really going on.
Okay, we're about 3 minutes away from getting our first returns of the evening. The polls in Ontario, of course, close at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. That would be 8 o'clock in Howard Hampton's hometown.
That's right.
And I want to find out from you three in particular what you're looking for tonight. Norm, what are you watching for?
Well, I hope Tim gets a minority government. I think that's within reasonable expectation. It will depend on how the vote fall out. When we were talking about polls, I have a great deal of trouble with believing a lot of the polling that's gone on. It has been so widely varying that it's really difficult to put your finger on where everybody is at the time. And I just hope that Tim can make it. I mean, he worked hard. I mean, the team has worked hard. And I say that to all of the politicians that are out there. I mean, they've worked their butts off over the last 6 or so months. Part of the problem with fixed date election, which I disagree with, but
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
Howard, what do you say for tonight? What are you looking for?
I think you'll see a minority government, but I think it's going to be very difficult to say who, because I think a lot of this is going to depend on the shifts in different ridings. So, for example, the Thunder Bay ridings, I think, are in play, but where the opposition vote to the two Liberal members goes. So does it go to the NDP or does it go to the Conservatives? If it goes to the NDP, NDP will get elected. If it goes to the Conservatives, the two Liberals will probably continue to be elected. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. Where did 1% of the vote shift? Did it shift to the Conservatives? Did it shift to the NDP? And that's going to determine a lot of seats.
Literally 1% of the vote shifting could make the difference.
Absolutely. I think it's that close in a number of ridings. I think it's certainly that close in a number of ridings in Northern Ontario.
Monique, what are you looking for?
Liberal majority, 56, 57 seats. I'd like to see it higher, but I think that's
Just tell
realistic.
everybody 54 is a majority.
Exactly.
So if you're saying
I think
56,
57.
you're saying by the skin of Dalton McGinty's teeth.
I think that's a majority. We'll take it. I'd like to see it higher, but I agree with Howard that I think a lot will depend on the splits. I mean, in my riding, we saw the NDP getting, having more signs, more presence, more volume, more noise out of the NDP than we have in a long time. That's going to break probably to our detriment locally, unfortunately. But I think that kind of breaking is happening in a lot of different ridings this
With
time.
30 seconds to go or so before the polls close here in the province of Ontario, what are you looking for tonight? Green breakthrough anywhere?
Dufferin-Caledon is the best one to watch tonight, but I'm not actually expecting a breakthrough anywhere. However, I've got to say I would prefer a Liberal minority, especially since they stole our policy with the Green Energy Act, and I think that that's a lot of what their popular support is from right now.
I think you guys like it when others steal your policy, though, right? As long
We
as
do.
it's good.
Justin Trudeau once told me he was going to steal my policy as much as possible, so I've heard it from lots of people.
Okay. We want to remind everybody that we're here, of course, on TVO all night long. We're going to have all results all the time. As soon as the polls close, we'll have the advanced poll numbers, which will come down first. We also urge you to go to yourvote2011.ca and follow along. There's a live chat going on there. There's how it works. Mike Miner moderating on the right-hand side. And then you can click on your own riding, or any riding for that matter, and see what's happening with the candidates, top 4 candidates running in that area. So we've got lots of ways for you to experience this election. They only happen once every 4 years, usually, guys. So now would be a time to focus, because now is the time when the polls are closing and we're going to start to get our first returns of the evening. And there's the leaderboard. This is how we're going to present the numbers to you throughout the course of the evening. At the bottom of the screen, that will be up there all the time. Leading and elected as the returns come in, 54, as we suggested, is a majority. 107 seats in the Ontario legislature, 107. A majority would be 54. The polls have been absolutely all over the place over the last few days. We've got the Tories leading in some, Liberals leading in others. Andrea Horvath, a potential kingmaker if it's a minority parliament. We're just not sure where things stand at the moment. Most of it seems to be within the margin of error, but having said that, I cannot remember an election in the last, well, you guys tell me, maybe ever, where we saw so much confusion and indecision and genuine not knowing about who was going to win.
I think 85 was, there were a lot of variables. I just don't think we had as many polls back then. So we didn't have the confusion and the clutter that we have in this campaign, because we've got all these numbers being thrown at us. But I think on the ground in 85, there was a feeling that things were definitely moving and shifting.
Well, 1990 was an unbelievable election. When Bob Rae came in with the NDP, it was, no one expected.
No one expected it at the beginning, but by the end, the numbers showed it was going to happen.
I mean, we were, when I was out canvassing, I'll never forget, somebody coming up and saying, I hear David Peterson is losing in London, and you sort of say, how can a leader lose his riding? And, it was such a huge shift that we had never experienced, that it was hard to imagine where all the ridings were going to go.
Howard Hampton got a cabinet job because of that shift.
For a week or two.
Well, even then it was wonderful.
I think we saw an election earlier this year where 2 leaders lost their jobs on the same night. And that's pretty unprecedented. These are strange times in politics these days. Okay, the polls are closed and we're starting to get the first smatterings of returns across the province of Ontario. If you look at the leaderboard at the bottom there, Progressive Conservatives out to an early lead. Now remember, these returns are going to come in very slowly at first, and then it's going to be like an avalanche. The numbers are going to start to really flow. We're going to start to get returns from all over the province. We should also say that there are 4 ridings where they kept the polls open a half an hour longer. Some kind of irregularities happening. Kenora Rainy River, Howard Hampton's old riding, was one of them. I think Trinity Spadina is another. Toronto Centre is another. Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry is the 4th. In those 4 ridings, they're keeping the polls open at 9:30, so you won't see any returns from those ridings for a while here. Stacey Dunseith is producing our program tonight in the control room. She's going to let me know when it's time to start to go to some graphics where we can lay out what's going on around the province tonight. But at this early juncture, 3 Conservatives, 1 Liberal, 1 NDP, and of course, we're going to watch that 4th column as well. The Greens, federally, earlier this year on May 2nd, made the big breakthrough and finally won a seat. First time ever in Canadian history. You know Mike Schreiner, Victoria, has been working his tail off, targeting 2 ridings in the hopes of making the Green breakthrough provincially. Which ridings has he been targeting?
Well, he actually was targeting kind of a swath of ridings, but the ones that look the best right now are Dufferin-Caledon. It was the highest. Rob Strang, who's one of our deputy leaders, was 29% pre-rid. And Mike's going to definitely up his vote in that riding, but it's a staunch Conservative riding that he's running in. So it's a situation very similar to Elizabeth May running in Nova Scotia in 2008. You know, sometimes when you're up against a hard person, it's hard to get your vote up too much. So there's a number of ridings that are being watched by the Greens where the votes will go up, but in general, our vote's been going down, sadly.
You were about 8.3%, I think, in the last Ontario election 4 years ago, and I'm not sure any polls had you higher than 5% this time, maybe even 4%. So the Green vote has gone for a bit of a
It has. We've had some issues. So I think some of them are strategic. Some of them are because issues like climate change aren't as top of mind and as high a priority for people when they're voting. And we've also had a different style of leadership and executive in the Green Party of Ontario. So, you know, things have changed.
Howard, in Andrea Horvath's wildest dreams, she came into this election with 10 seats. What would she go out with tonight? Based on what you know, what's possible, what the polls have shown, what could she reasonably expect to get tonight?
Well, based upon what the polls have been showing, and then factoring in the shifts, if all of the shifts happen the way New Democrats would like them to happen, I think we could see 30 seats.
30 seats.
Now, will they all happen? That's asking a lot. I would suspect that Andrea will be very happy with 21 seats.
We should remember, I think in 1985, NDP had 25% of the total vote, got 25 seats.
Yeah.
So it's doable. She's at 25 in most of the polls we've seen lately.
It is doable. If we get some breaks in the shifts, you could easily be up to 25.
Norm Sterling, what's a good night for Tim Hudak based on what you know of what's possible?
Oh, I think the mid-40s would be my guess for Tim.
Coming first in the mid-40s.
Yeah.
So it's a minority government,
Yeah.
kind of probably 10 seats shy of a majority.
Yeah.
Okay. Monique?
Sticking to my predictions, I think 56, 57. I think best case probably 60, maybe 62. Squeak out a few more that we talked about earlier off air. You know, there are a few squeakers that I think if they start to shift our way, then we're definitely looking in better territory.
So it's interesting. You think the best case scenario for the Premier tonight is losing 10 seats. That's another way to look at it.
Or you can look at it as a majority, which is a great way to look at it.
Okay.
We'll agree to disagree on that one all night long, I'm sure.
It's just an interpretation, that's all. All right, you can tell that we've started to cycle some of the election returns into the top right corner of our screen tonight. This is all from the 905 ridings here, and I think it's fair to say, Jim, the 905, in many respects, picks the government nowadays. These seats have been in play for, what, 4 elections in a row right now? These guys may determine who sits in Queen's Park next time around.
Absolutely, and they seem to have been the subject of great blandishments and attention. This time the leaders were up and down the 401 and around those ridings like crazy. You know, we used to think of them in a way as a kind of homogeneous area, and they're much more fascinating now. They're multicultural in the extreme. Some of the problems of urban poverty and social issues have begun to spread into some of the inner suburbs as well. So they're a little more complicated, and they're certainly been fluid.
I should just tell our director, Michael Smith, you should feel free if you like to continue to cycle, even if we have very tiny results at the early stages here. I notice at Bruce Grey Owen Sound, Shane Jolly, who ran for your party last time, is running as an independent this time, is in second place right now. Early returns. We're not going to get too excited with any of the returns that we see at this stage of the game because, admittedly, these are going to be advanced polls, 1 poll, 2 polls reporting, fairly early stages. But they will start over the course of the evening to tell a story. At the moment, 6 progressive Conservative seats, 4 Liberal seats, nothing up for the New Democrats yet, nothing up for the Greens yet. We should remind you that at dissolution, when the House rose, 70 Liberals, 25 Tories, 10 New Democrats, no Greens, 2 vacancies. So that's where the yardsticks are coming into tonight's vote. And at the moment, the Conservatives are out to an early lead. Here's one seat, you know, 905, again, Dufferin-Caledon. This is where that pit is, right? This is where the big aggregate
It's a mega
pit
quarry.
is.
Mega quarry.
So the mega quarry, as
Mega.
as the Greens and its opponents like to call it. Do you have any sense of how that is? I mean, that's supposed to be an extremely safe Conservative seat. Do you have any sense about how the mega quarry may play out as an election issue?
Well, I do believe that the Greens were the only ones who seriously took it on as an election issue before the writ dropped. So they've been talking about it, and Mike Schreiner's been traveling there, and Rob Strang has been talking up and down. And you know, Rob Strang was a Northville councillor, so he has a lot of experience in that area. He's very well trusted. So I think that the mega quarry is going to be a big voting issue. It's probably going to be the biggest ballot question in that riding, and it will make a difference on the results.
The incumbent, though, Sylvia Jones, she's been all over this thing for a long period of time, and it's just not during the election period that she's been there. She's been fighting it and showing her fight to the public, and I expect it will help her.
You would expect her to hold that seat.
Oh, I'll bet you $5 on that, Steve.
Another bet on the table.
Sylvia's probably pretty safe, but it's worth pointing out that the Environment Minister John Wilkinson, just virtually on the eve of the election call, they announced a referral of that project to an environmental assessment, which was a sort of historic victory for the opponents of it locally. And
Did kind of take it off the table as an election issue.
Yes, it did, and the Liberal has been claiming tremendous credit for this in that campaign, according to the local folks.
It's on the signs saying that she's against them.
We continue to cycle through early election returns here. This is in Sudbury. Wouldn't Rick Bartolucci like a nice birthday present, 68th birthday present 4 days from now, if he could hold that riding in Sudbury? Now look at again, that's 2 polls reporting out of 243. There in the southwest of the province, Ernie Hardeman, that's generally thought to be a very safe Conservative seat. Hardeman out to an early lead in that riding. We're just going to, even though they're very scattered returns and very early returns coming in, we are going to show you these numbers as they come in just to start to set the stage for what's going to happen tonight. There's 1 poll reporting in Bruce Grey Owen Sound. That's Bill Murdoch's old seat. Again,
That's Bill's.
Can I
It won't
mention-
be the same without Bill.
won't be the same without Bill, but it might still be Conservative. Now there's
one to watch there with Helena Jasic. She's vulnerable there to the Tory in that riding, and that's one of those classic 905 swing ridings that'll
that little
might be a
star
good
beside,
indicator.
The little star beside Helena Jasic's name means that she was the former sitting member in the last legislature, and you're right, Jim, that is an absolute bellwether riding, a tough one. If it's a good night for the Conservatives will take that seat. If it's a good night for Dalton McGinty, Helena Jasic should be okay. You look at the bottom of the screen, 8 Tories, 7 Liberals, very close. I'm telling you, this thing is expected to be a cliffhanger all night long, and there's another example. 2 polls reporting in Brampton Springdale, the Natural Resources Minister Linda Jeffrey, the former sitting member, 2-vote lead over Pam Hundal. That's, again, another one of those ridings where if it's a good night for the Tories, they'll take that riding. One of those 905 ridings where the leaders have been absolutely up and down all around.
Oh.
Dufferin Caledon,
Here we
1
go.
poll reporting. I should also mention this. There's a website out now that votes on the sexiest candidates.
Did we talk about that last night?
And we did talk about it last night, yeah. The kid who
I was
who
knocking
does it
on
was
doors,
on
but
it.
I heard.
Thanks be to God, these 3 are retired.
Because it wouldn't have been a fair contest. But if you want to bring that one up again, bring Dufferin Caledon up again, please, because Madam Holloway won.
Lori is great.
Lori Holloway won for the women as the sexiest candidate. And this was all voted. 100,000 people voted.
A mom, 2 young boys, activist.
And the male sexiest candidate, Howard, you'll be glad to know, was a New Democrat. And we'll see his picture come up at one point during the evening. Here's Elizabeth Whitmer in Kitchener-Waterloo. This would be extremely unusual if she were to lose that seat
And that's
tonight.
where the wonky star poll, I think, showed her as, in play. And I thought, there's no way that Liz Whitmer is going to lose her
No,
seat.
she's the grand dame of the Tory caucus. I think we can safely assume she'll be
She
back.
is born in the Netherlands, just had her 65th birthday. She will undoubtedly, by the end of the evening, we suspect, be going back to Queen's Park.
But she has to contend with 2 universities in her riding, and those voters change each term. So the predictability of where they're going to vote is never known, and it's not in the bank.
I should also mention here the 1 poll reporting in Elgin, Middlesex, London. That shaded silhouette means that it's an independent candidate, and that's Paul McKeever, of the leader of the Freedom Party, who's running there in Elgin, Middlesex, London. They've actually got candidates running in a few dozen ridings across the province. They didn't hit all 107, but they've got a few dozen going there. But again, this is
Could TVO not
close
find
battles.
pictures of these poor people?
Ottawa, West Nepean.
It's one of your great arm wrestling matches there.
That'll be
Bob,
a
Absolutely.
Bob
battle. Yeah.
Chiarelli, the infrastructure minister, and Randall Denley, who was a colleague of mine when I was at the Ottawa Citizen. He was a little right-wingish for my taste as a columnist, but he's decided to dive into the fray now, and they expect that to be very close all night.
As it already is, with one poll reporting, and it is a tie. 14 Liberals, 14 Conservatives, 2 New Democrats, no Greens yet tonight, as the returns from across the province of Ontario continue to roll in. We'll continue cycling them in the northeast corner of our screen there. Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, that's a pretty safe, or has been anyway, pretty safe Liberal seat with the Liberals at the moment. There's John Garretson, Cabinet Minister in the last Ontario legislature, out to an early lead in Kingston and the Islands. Got to
No
remember,
surprise there.
well, John Garretson helped make Dalton McGinty the leader of the Liberal Party.
His
one's gonna be
son's the mayor, I
interesting,
think, in
too.
Kingston
Yes,
as
that's
well.
right.
So
Yeah.
Full
Garrison
disclosure
family.
on this one, folks. Hamilton East Stony Creek, Howie knows this. That's my cousin, Paul Miller, who's in the lead for the Democrats. He barely scraped by less than 1,000 votes to win that one last time. He seems pretty confident that he's going to take it by more this time. Paul Miller from Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Hamilton will be one of the great spots for the Democrats tonight. I think
Should be, but the Hamilton papers weren't too kind to Andrea. There
No,
was
some
some
of the-
guffaw
Yeah, there
around
was.
her comments
All about the
about
hospital.
health care. Exactly.
I
that
think the
came out
story
of the
about the
debate.
kid with the broken arm was,
Got overplayed a bit.
they went after
yeah.
her on that.
He didn't look injured today standing behind her voting, I have to say.
Here we should point out the Minister of Finance in his own riding of Windsor-Tecumseh's got a 2-1 lead over his challenger. Early returns again. Now, how about this? We want to keep an eye on this one because Perth Wellington features John Wilkinson. And John Wilkinson's Mr. HST, everybody. He was the revenue minister who managed to bring this policy in. And Jim, I think you'd have to say, you know, we didn't have riots in the streets like they did in BC, so he must have done a pretty good job doing Dalton
He did
McGinty's
a
business
terrific
on
job. That's one of those sort of southwestern Ontario ridings that's fairly conservative-ish, and Wilkinson is probably going to be in tight, and it'll be interesting to watch him too, because whenever we talk about successors down the road to the Premier as leader of the Liberal Party, his is the name that often comes up, so winning that seat would be handy.
that. Manette, see potential? I know we're looking down the road. John Wilkinson, do you hear his name mentioned in leadership circles?
We have a great leader right now.
Oh my gosh. Don't have to be so politically correct so early in the evening.
Oh, wait till later. Things might get a little crazier.
They might get a
I
little
think
bit-
Ernie Hardeman that we just saw up there is actually an interesting riding because he is his riding is one of the beneficiaries from the Green Energy Act, and his party has threatened to rip up the act and the deal. So I think I don't think he's as comfortable as
Okay.
he would have been.
Speaking of leadership, here
Yes.
is the
There's
leader
the
of your
boss,
party.
yes.
Here's Ottawa South. You know that's McGinty territory. David McGinty, the Premier's brother, holds it federally. Dalton McGinty, somebody named Dalton McGinty has represented this riding ever since 1987. Of course, it was the Premier's father before that. When his father died unexpectedly, the family sat around, the story goes. They said, who's going to run in Dad's place? Dalton
His
said
name.
it. I got a garage full of signs with my
It
name
was
on it.
on the sides, exactly.
Yeah. And so Dalton McGinty never actually wins the riding by a heck of a lot, but he's out early there. Hamilton Centre, Andrea Horvath out to about a little better than a 2.5 to 1 lead over her Liberal challenger with only 2 polls reporting, but I think people would be astonished to see Andrea Horvath in a close fight for her riding. Howard, she's going to slam dunk that one, we suspect, no?
I think that she will do extremely well.
And
I think
been the feel-good story of the campaign in a way, and she was one of those people. She's an authentic human being, and the more people saw her, the more they seemed to like her.
And to
I
give
think,
her due,
I
I-
think that'll flow over into the other Hamilton ridings too.
So they
for
might
the
pick up
NDP.
what, Mountain?
I think so.
Okay.
I think she weathered the campaign really well, too. We talked about it a little bit last week when we were talking post-debate about the pacing of an election campaign for first-time leaders, and Howie knows this well, and I worked on Dalton's campaign in his first time out as leader, and it's a grueling run. And I thought, I saw her on a couple of clips yesterday. I thought she was still looking great and still energized, ready to go. It wasn't showing, so
Norm
good for
Sterling?
her.
She's become a real fitness buff.
Norm, that's we just saw from your neck of the woods, Lennox, the Hillier riding. He won that by just 1,000 votes last time.
Right.
What do you expect for tonight? He's off to a 2 to 1 lead with early returns
Well,
so far.
I think he's going to win the riding. The people in the riding are very, very anti-McGinty government, and they just have, many have said to me, we don't have a choice.
So Randy Hillier it is. You should remember that he ran for the leadership of the party against Tim Hudak, came 4th through his support to Hudak. Listen, we've heard this expression in the United States, Tea Party candidates. If we have a Tea Party
He
in
would
this
be it.
province,
He
he'd be
would
it.
Would be it,
He'd
absolutely.
be full of scandals as
And he
well.
and he may have a partner in crime from Mr. Sterling's old riding.
Yes.
Hey, we're going to wait to see some returns from Carleton, Mississippi Mills, which was Norm Sterling's old riding.
Let's hope not.
Here's in London North Centre. And this is always a hotly contested riding. Again, big university crowd there, which can help the NDP. Deb Matthews is the Minister of Health, from a great political family as well. You know, her brother-in-law is David Peterson, the former Premier. Her father, Don Matthews, was a former president of the Conservative Party of Canada. Deb Matthews, I think...
Fantastic Minister of Health.
Well, I was going to say, she's got pretty good reviews in doing her job, and off to an early lead against Nancy Branscombe in the City of London tonight. 31 Liberal seats, 24 Conservative seats, the NDP now inching up to 8.
Liking these numbers better.
Remember, the NDP got 10 seats in the last Parliament. They're at 8 right now, so they're almost where they were.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, this is now 5 polls reporting in Perth, Wellington, and the Liberal Wilkinson has dropped to second, only 5 votes. These things may seesaw. If this election is as close as everybody thinks it's going to be, these Liberal-Tory battles are going to seesaw all night long. So we really have got to be careful not to get too excited by what we see. And remember, these numbers at the bottom of the screen, this is leading and elected. And leading at this stage of the game, we can safely say. The polls have only been closed for 21 minutes. 35 Liberals leading. Nobody's been elected yet. 29 Conservatives leading. 9 New Democrats, so they're almost where they were election night 4 years ago. Still no Greens. 54 needed for a majority government. Here's the Minister of Finance in southwestern Ontario in Windsor-Tecumseh. Always surprised, Howard, that the NDP doesn't do better in Windsor. It's been all Liberal territory lately. How come?
I think that there's almost an agreement in Windsor. You vote NDP federally and you vote Liberal provincially. And it's been like that for about the last 15 years.
What do you think is going to happen with Sandra Pupatello's seat? She's not there. It's an open seat. Have the NDP got a shot?
We have a very good shot. I think that's one that definitely could come our way. And I know very enthusiastic about the candidate, very enthusiastic about the campaign.
Monique, when you have somebody who is as popular as Pupatello, who leaves, much to everybody's surprise, she really waited to the last minute to do it, and then you've got kind of a new candidate in there who people obviously, I mean, the new candidate won't have the profile that she had. A risk for the Liberals tonight?
Well, there's always a risk when there's change, but I think that, you know, what you have to do is remind the folks of the record of what she's done. There's been some great work done in Windsor. Both Sandra and Dwight have done an incredible amount for Windsor. And, you know, they've been through the economic tough times that we've seen globally. And I think that they've weathered the storm fairly well. I mean, there's still lots of work to be done, but I think Sandra, her legacy will play well in the community, for sure.
It's not for nothing they've been getting the support of the Canadian auto workers as well. The auto bailout package has probably secured the Windsor area, I would think.
I should ask Howard about that. You know, I mean, does it really, I was going to say piss you off, but you can't say that on TV, so does it really upset you when you see Ken Luenza, the head of the CAW, up there with Dalton McGinty, and he didn't do any events with Andrea Horvath. He only did events with Dalton McGinty.
The auto workers have been, you know, I think it's called Gomperism, you know, sort of the Gompers approach to trade unionism, which is, you know, you go with whoever you think can butter your bread. And I think the auto workers have been doing that for a while now. Again, the same folks who probably campaigned for Liberal provincial candidates in Windsor, only a few months ago were campaigning for federal NDP candidates. And you see that it's almost an agreement in Windsor, a silent agreement.
We told you at the beginning of the evening that the 905 area of this province, and by that, of course, we mean the 905 area code, that belt of ridings around the city of Toronto that goes all the way from Halton in the west, York region in the north, Durham region in the east. 24 ridings will be absolutely decisive in what happens, and at the moment, the Liberals are leading in 12 of those 24 ridings. The Conservatives have got up to 10, so that's an improved performance for them, and nothing from the other two parties as of yet. But it has not been an exaggeration to say whoever carries the 905 will win the province. Mike Harris took every seat in the 905 2 elections in a row, and he won for that reason. As we cycle through these ones, the Liberals are hanging on to a, again, early but slim lead in Brampton-Springdale. In Halton, Ted Chudley won this by fewer than 1,000 votes last time around. This riding, Halton, which had been true blue for so long, has now become one of those kind of classical 905 ridings. It's not a rural riding anymore.
And Indira's got high profile and lots of good buzz about her
She's
up there.
an attractive candidate there and an indicator of how much that riding
And again,
has changed.
full disclosure,
Absolutely.
she used to work here. Mississauga, Brampton South, Amrit
And
Mangat.
that riding has increased by a large number of people over the last,
Indeed.
since '07. So you can't look at '07 and say that those
That's
results.
quite true.
Yeah.
Now here's an open seat. We always like to keep an eye on the open seats. Peter Fonseca would routinely win this seat with 60% of the vote, but now it's open. He's gone. He went to run federally, lost. Mississauga East Cooksville at early returns, Deepika Damerla won the nomination, a very tough nomination fight, which she prevailed in, and she has the early lead over her Conservative challenger. Remember, 54, look at the bottom of the screen, 54 needed for a majority. The Liberals are edging closer to 50. Mississauga South is one of the truest, bluest ridings in the province. And yet, Charles Sousa hangs on to it so far for the Liberals. You'll remember him.
There's a power plant canceled there, though.
Well, go ahead, Jim. You got it. You got it.
But Charles is a great candidate too. He's a great member.
He's the Labour
Charles
Minister.
is a terrific member, but he was, I think he was in a little tougher than these numbers suggest, and he needed some help, and the Premier was gracious enough to provide it.
With 11 days to go in this campaign, and millions of dollars of foundation poured in that gasified power plant, which is actually in Mississauga, East Cooksville, but certainly all the surrounding ridings didn't like it. The Premier pulled the plug on that thing, and that may have just helped Charles Sousa tonight in what is traditionally a very blue riding.
It's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars, too, to get out of it.
We shall see. We're
not getting out of it. We're moving.
Premier
it more.
says he's insisting on moving
You're
it.
going to take the foundation with you?
Newmarket Aurora. Speaking of challengers to Tim Hudak, Tim, we saw Randy Hillier earlier. Frank Cleese came second to Tim Hudak in that leadership campaign, and Frank Cleese right now has an early lead after just 14 polls reporting in Newmarket Aurora. Christina Bazant's the Liberal challenger there. In Oakville, speaking of canceled power plants, Kevin Flynn worked hard as a Liberal insider inside that Liberal caucus in order to get that power plant that was in Oakville canceled. He did, and he's out to an early lead there over Larry Scott, who the Tories had high hopes for tonight, Ron. Richmond Hill, Reza Maridi. Now, this is an interesting guy. This is one of, I think, 3 engineers in the Ontario legislature. Norm, you were one.
Yeah.
Reza Maridi, the former sitting member, I believe is the first ever Iranian Canadian elected to any legislature anywhere in Canada. And he won the seat last time. He has an early lead over Vic Gupta, but still a long way to go before
Great guy.
anybody's going to...
He's a nuclear physicist.
Very
He is.
bright,
Yeah,
incredibly
yeah.
bright, and just a lovely man. Just,
He's a great
glad
guy.
to see he's doing well.
But again, one of these seats where, if the Tories are going to be competitive tonight, they'll have to win. This, I think, is one of the
This is
most
exciting.
fascinating
Where's my
ridings in the
$5?
province. Hang on. Let's set this up here. Leave this one up for a while, please, Michael. Okay, this riding in 1999 went to the Conservatives by a few hundred votes. In 2003, it went Liberal by a few hundred. Last time out, in 2007, it went Conservative by about 1,500, and now it looks poised. Early returns, everybody, 5% of the polls reporting, looks poised potentially to the return to the Liberals. This is one of just 2 ridings in the whole province where the top 2 candidates are both from the Jewish community. And Peter Sherman won it for the Conservatives last time, thus the star beside his name. But Bernie Farber, who's an extremely high-profile and very active member of the Jewish community up north of Steeles, thinks that even if McGinty were to lose tonight, he could take that seat away from the Conservatives. It's one to watch, Monique, no question about it.
It's one to watch, absolutely. They've got a great team up there. They've been knocking on doors like crazy. I was up last week, and it was amazing, the enthusiasm and the presence. So, and I know that Bernie's been out working just like crazy. So I'm glad to see the early returns. I understand it's early. I won't collect my $5 yet.
That would have been perhaps the one seat in all of Ontario that went Conservative last time because of the faith-based schools issues. The Jewish community was very interested in that policy, and as a result, the seat went Conservative. Okay, Stacey, we ready to go to the northwest of the province? Howard Hampton will be particularly interested in what's happening in his old neck of the woods. Howie, after all, 24 years representing northwestern Ontario, most recently as the member for Kenora Rainy River. At the moment, in the 5 ridings in the northwest, Grits leading in 3, New Democrats in 1, shutout still for the Tories and for the Greens. In Algoma, Manitoulin, this actually is not a surprise, folks. Mike Brown, who's represented that riding for 24 years, I spent a lot of time in the summer on Manitoulin Island, where Mike lives, actually. And it was apparent to people you talked to up there that he would be in some difficulty. This seat went New Democrat federally, taking it away from the Liberals, and my suspicion is the same thing is going to happen provincially. Mike Brown, the former Speaker, former sitting member in the last Parliament, trailing Michael Mantha right now by a 2-to-1 margin with just over 10% of the polls reporting. Let's continue on, taking our look at the Northwest. Here's Kenora Rainy River. Howard, this is your old riding, nothing to report so far. Can you tell us anything about Sarah Campbell?
They're not even closed yet.
Sarah Campbell's a very energetic, intelligent, hardworking young woman who has actually, in one way or another, has been campaigning for about 5 years.
How so?
Well, I told her when
Told her to start?
when she came to work for me, I said, if you think you someday want to do this, you should start preparing yourself now. You don't wait. You don't wait around. Get out there and get known, start raising issues. She's elected to a a non-municipal council in an unorganized area. She was also the president of the board of the local women's shelter in Dryden.
We should just explain to everybody there are zeros across the board there because there were some irregularities in one of the polling stations in that riding. So we're actually still about a minute away from the polls being closed in Kenora Rainy River.
Sarah Campbell's also under 30, I think, isn't she, Howie? And if there's a screaming need for anything in the legislature, it's probably the presence of young women.
Now look at this one. This is quite unusual. Now again, 20% of the polls reporting. Let's not get excited yet. David Orazietti has won this riding for the Liberals the last 2 elections in a row with 60% of the vote, so no surprise that he's in the lead. But the Conservatives were quite excited about this guy named Jib Turner, particularly since the Sioux went Conservative federally just 6 months ago. Turner, who runs he is 6th generation running a retail store in Little Current on Manitoulin Island. And he certainly thought he was, in fact, he was a representative of the local Help and Integration Network, thought they were terrible, quit, decided to seek the Tory nomination and got it, all for the purposes of running against the Liberals and ripping up these LINs, which the Conservatives say they will do. But certainly the early returns suggest that David Orazietti is set to go back to Queen's Park, and the NDP is the big challenger there.
Orazzetti's such a worker, honestly. I mean, nobody works their riding harder than Orazietti.
Now this one will be fascinating. Again, Thunder Bay Atikokan, Bill Morrow won that seat by 50 votes last time. 50 votes. But of course, Howard, the Liberals shut down the coal-fired generating plant near there and put a lot of people out of work, and Morrow suffered his vote total as a result of that. He's got a much healthier lead so far tonight, with about 20% of the polls reporting, than he did 4 years ago tonight. Fred Gilbert's the former president of Lakehead University, and I know he thought he'd run a more competitive campaign. Hasn't happened yet. But again, early returns, we'll see what happens. Continuing our look in northwestern Ontario, Michael Gavel, who's the Northern Development Minister, who again, last time out, just won by, I think, about 1,000 votes. A very close race, given the large majorities, large pluralities he'd put up in the previous election. Gravel, though, out to an early 340-some-odd vote lead over his New Democratic challenger in Thunder Bay, Superior North, and it may well be, and again, he would have been tarred with the closing down of that coal-fired generating station last time, and given 4 years later. I'm actually interested, though, Howard, why you think the Liberal numbers are as decent as they are so far, given that the Premier failed to show up for that Northern debate and was supposedly going to be punished for it?
It will depend very much which community they come from. So you can actually be popular in one community and be the black sheep in the next community. So it depends very much on which communities those early returns are coming from.
Very good point. Let's also remind you tonight that you can not only check us out on television, but we also invite you to go to our website, yourvote2011.ca. We've got everything there you really need to experience the election in even more depth. We have online chat that Mike Miner is moderating from the Ossington Pub in downtown Toronto. You can go to the Ossington too, frankly, if you want to, at Ossington and Queen. There's the chat that's happening in the right-hand column. And in addition, you can scroll down, pick any riding out of the 107 you want across the province, click on it. You'll get all the information you need to know about all the candidates running in those ridings. Results, online chat, yourvote2011.ca.
And they're funny.
What's funny?
Read some
you're
of
reading them
these.
now.
I'm reading them right now.
You want to hit us with one now?
Well, blah, blah, blah. I think that was pretty appropriate for how a lot of people think about this election.
Oh, I thought they were commenting on us.
No, they're commenting about the conversation, but a lot of people just, even though they're participating, they still are really disillusioned. It's kind of sad.
Well, I think the early trend in the evening looks like we're trending. No one's calling this early, folks, trust me. Long way to go. But we are trending towards at least a Liberal government right now, with 48 Liberal seats, 39 Conservative seats, 13 New Democratic seats, and no Greens yet. 54 needed for a majority, so the Premier's party is still well short of what it needs to do to get to a majority government. But at this early juncture in the evening, and remember, the polls are still only closed for 35 minutes in most of the ridings and just 5 minutes closed in 4 of the ridings, where there are a few irregularities. But at this early juncture, the Liberals are out to an early 8-seat lead over the Conservatives. The Liberals do well when they clean up in the 416. This is Toronto, 23 ridings. The Liberals are leading or elected in 15, the New Democrats in 4, the Tories in 1. They've not elected a member in the 416 since 1999. They certainly broke through federally earlier this year. Let's see, as we go through some of the ridings here in the 416, to see what the Conservatives are leading in right now. But at the moment, Toronto seems to be very good for the Liberal Party. Only 3 polls reporting, but I'll tell you what, Rosario Marchese told me a week and a half ago, 101% guaranteed Davenport would be taken from the Liberals and going to the New Democrats. And Jonah Shine, he was very high on that candidate, has about almost a 2-to-1 lead over his Liberal challenger, Christina Martins, at this early juncture. There's Frank de Young, incidentally, the former leader of the Green Party, in 4th spot in that riding. In the riding of Don Valley West, remember, this is where Kathleen Wynne, the Transportation Minister, defeated John Tory in the last Ontario election. The Conservatives have a great candidate in Andrea Mandel-Campbell, former journalist, BNN anchor. Had Conservative fortunes been higher in Toronto, they really thought the Conservatives did, that they could take that seat from the Liberals. Kathleen Wynne is just, Monique, she is an extremely popular cabinet minister.
She's incredibly popular. She's incredibly popular in the riding. I don't, you know, I mean, for someone who lives in Toronto, she gets out to so many things back in her riding every night. She's just on the ground all the time, plus all her cabinet responsibilities. She's an incredible worker.
This is probably the most controversial race in the whole 416. And remember, this is Rocco Rossi, the former national director of the Federal Liberal Party, who quit that to run for mayor of Toronto, did not do well in the mayoralty race, decided to, even though he wasn't a member, crossed the floor, joined the Conservatives, met with Tim Hudak, liked him, liked what he had to say, thought the Liberal Party was abandoning its centrist roots, and decided to go for a shot for the Conservatives against Mike Cole. Mike Cole's held this seat since 1995. Jim, I have to say that if this is the one Tory lead in the city of Toronto right now, it's only 3 votes, way too early, but clearly the Tories would love to get that one.
Absolutely, and that was expected to be a knockdown, drag him out. When I was sitting having coffee with a former Liberal cabinet minister last week, and Rocco Rossi went by, and talk about ice in the air. The Liberals have some really hard feelings about Rocco. Yeah, you know, you didn't need to order iced cappuccino. I'll tell you, it was a pretty frosty thing. But Rocco was pretty confident and upbeat about this one. And Mike Cole is one of your great street fighting Pauls too, and good organization, and he likes nothing better than the challenge. They've been butting heads pretty good down
Norm,
there.
let me ask you this. If Rocco Rossi wins, the guy's been a Liberal since he was 14 years old. Does the Conservative Party welcome a guy who's been a Liberal for his whole life with open arms because he wins a seat?
Well, he wasn't really a Liberal. He was a Conservative all along. He just didn't realize it.
Time to figure it out.
Bob Ray syndrome.
Listen, I tell you, of all of the Conservative candidates, and I still get blackberried by, you know, a lot of what's going on in the campaign, I got more contacts from Rossi than anyone else.
Meaning he emailed you
He emailed everybody.
personally.
Yeah, well, to get everybody down to his campaign, can you come down and do a few hours of this? Can you do a few hours of that? So he seemed to be very, very well organized, and in terms of trying to get help out and doing all the rest of it.
Victoria?
Well, I know Rocco. I was his mentor in the climate project, and most people I don't think realize that he was trained by Al Gore, and he's a climate presenter. So he's done a lot of work in a lot of areas that people don't quite understand. But once they get to know him, they like him, and he's a straight shooter. He's a good guy.
Look at those numbers on the bottom of the screen, friends. 52 Liberal seats. They are 2 shy of a majority government right now, but remember, these are based on very early returns. There's going to be a lot of flip-flop before this thing is over. 52 grit seats at the moment, 2 short of a majority, 38 Progressive Conservatives. And look at this, in Trinity Spadina, where the polls have just closed 7 minutes ago.
$5.
Sarah Thompson, again like Rocco Rossi, a failed mayoralty candidate in the city of Toronto, off to a very early lead. Don't collect your $5 yet, Minik.
yet.
This one's a long way from over. Rosario
Rose has
Marchese,
got deep roots.
he's represented, Rosario Marchese has that riding since 1990, and I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't be...
And before that, as a school trustee.
And
Yeah.
correct.
And incredibly well liked, really.
And at the
on all
moment,
sides.
with early returns, less than 10% of the polls reporting Sarah Thompson is off to an early lead. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Here's one of those ridings where when the Liberals win, Willowdale goes Liberal. That's what's happened the last 2 times. David Zimmer is the former sitting member. He has a big and early lead. And then up here in York Centre, we wanted to keep an eye on this one because Monty Quinter earlier this year turned 80. There are not too many 80-year-old legislators left in this country.
There aren't too many Monty Quinters, though.
Monty's probably shaking his hands with everyone in that riding.
Twice.
This one's a tight race to watch as well. This is Jerry Phillips's old seat. Jerry, of course, been around since 1985, a much beloved, I think it's okay to say, former cabinet minister in the Peterson and McGinty years. And with early returns in, Sue Wong holds just a very narrow lead over Liang Chen. Once again, this is a seat that Phillips would win by 10, 20,000 votes. Unlikely to be that tight this time around with his departure, but the Liberals, of course, certainly hope to keep it in their category. Continuing our look through the four, now we're going out to the 905. In Brampton, Mississauga South, Amrit Mangat, once again, holding on to a slim lead over her Conservative challenger. This is one of those races in the 905 that, you know, if it's going to be a good night for Tim Hudak, he'll win this riding. If it's a good night for Dalton McGinty, the Liberals will hang on to this riding. Early impressions, folks, as we go. Victoria, what do you think? What's transpiring?
It seems to me like it's happening as it's expected. Little thing I'd like to mention is that there are a lot of ridings there where there are really strong, like cabinet members and things like that, but there's also a really strong Green candidate in them. There are people like Tim Grant, and there was an NDP, Andrew McAvoy. He ran as a Green in the last election. He's now switched over, and there's a lot of interesting things happening underneath all of those numbers that I wish more people understood.
I think we can safely say at this point that we're going to see a Liberal government in the province of Ontario by the end of the evening. What we're going to have to wait and find out is it a minority or a majority? It is right on the cusp right now. You need 54 for a majority.
Well, now,
the Liberals are at 52 now.
There is another possibility.
Which is?
If Andrea Horvath and Tim Hudak get together and do what happened to Frank Miller in 1985.
The split there was 4 seats, though, Norm.
No, but
it's a little bigger tonight.
I know it's bigger, but notwithstanding that, you're talking real possibilities.
Let's look at some of the tight races that are going on, and maybe it'll help explain this one. How about this in Sudbury? Howard, you and I were talking about this earlier this evening because we're both married to Sudbury girls. And look at Rick Bartolucci. All of the feedback we were getting from Sudbury was that Rick Bartolucci, who's been winning elections up there by 10 and 15,000 votes, was in trouble tonight. He's in trouble tonight.
We felt for some time that Rick Bartolucci was offside with people in Sudbury. The whole labor situation in terms of Valley Inco, now Valley. There were some big healthcare issues in Sudbury that the feeling was he just wasn't in touch with. And so I'd be surprised if Rick Bartolucci can win this, based upon what I was hearing.
He turned 68 in 4 days, and if he doesn't win, that's not going to be a happy birthday for him. But he's been a long-time cabinet minister in the province of Ontario. He's having a tough time tonight in the riding of Sudbury. 50 Liberals, 39 Conservatives, 18 New Democrats. That's up 8 from where they were before. As much as the Liberal vote is down tonight, the NDP are doing well on the splits, in part because of races like this one. Look, with a quarter of the votes in, Sophia Agilanides, who is the revenue minister from Hamilton Mountain, is trailing badly in that race. And that's, again, another one of those seats, Monique, where when the NDP vote goes up provincially, they do well on the mountain.
Well, and Hamilton, Andrea being from Hamilton, there is, as Howie said, a spillover effect to the entire region. Sophia is very popular. She's been a great cabinet minister, real great addition to the caucus. It'd be a shame to lose her. But, when Andrea did have a fairly strong performance throughout this campaign, and I think the spillover in that entire region is going to show.
This is the Andrea Horvath effect. Andrea is very, very popular in the whole Hamilton, Niagara region, and this will be, I won't take anything away from Monique. She has worked very, very hard in Hamilton for about the last 10 years, but I think this is very much the Andrea Horvath effect.
Sophia didn't win by much last time,
No.
but she was one of the people most delighted to be at Queen's Park of any MPP, I think. She used to tell me the number of days she'd been a cabinet minister. I think she counted them day by day. She was just a joy to see around the place. She never stopped smiling.
And her folks watched question period every
hugged
day.
everyone she ever met.
She won by 1,300 last time, which was clearly not a big enough cushion to rest on for tonight. The Horvath effect may be kicking in all of the Hamilton ridings because of that campaign. Let's not lose sight of the fact as we look at some bellwether ridings. The NDP's up 8 seats, but the Conservatives are up 13 seats. They're having a good night so far. Maybe not as good as they wanted, but compared to last time, they're doing better. This is the #1 bellwether riding in the whole province. As goes Peterborough, so goes the government. I think in every election since Confederation, Peterborough has voted with the winner, and tonight it looks like Jeff Leal is the guy. Monique, he's won twice in a row. Looks like he's going to win again.
Yes, Jeff and I have been there together for the last 8 years. He again is a really great constituency guy. Keeps his head down, does his job. He was the government whip, so I worked closely with him as the House leader. And good down home, always telling me what was going on in Peterborough, the latest news.
I think that's one of the ridings where we talked earlier about where does the opposition vote go, and I think what you see there is the opposition vote is splitting equally between the Conservatives and the New Democrats.
Which
So
helps
that's,
Liberals.
So that's where Liberals can win one on the splits.
Yeah.
Let's continue to look at our bellwether ridings. Look at this one. This is the rubber match, and we knew this would be so close. And look, it's 2 votes.
Wow.
2 votes.
Wow.
These two, Paul Ferreira and Laura Albanese, have gone against each other in 2 elections already. A by-election in 2007, which Ferreira won, and then the general election in 07, which Albanese won. They're at it again. It's always decided by just a handful of votes, I think a few hundred either way each time. The rubber match tonight, it could be closer, could be 1 vote, but at the moment it's 2 votes.
I think we'll be waiting
Which is
late
pretty
into the
close.
night for that one.
Indeed, indeed we shall. Let's continue to look at the bellwether ridings. Kathleen Wynne, now a 2-to-1 margin over Andrea
Wow.
Mandel Campbell. That one's going to stay in the Liberal circles. You can put a check beside that one. Randy Hillier with a massive win tonight. Only a third of the polls reporting, but he's out to an almost 3,000 vote lead there. He only won by 1,000 last time out. They're having a tea party in Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington tonight. More bellwether ridings. How about in Barrie? This was a Liberal riding last time. Eileen Carroll, who was in Paul Martin's cabinet federally, decided to come to the province, won a seat there. So it's an open seat right now. And at the moment, Rod Jackson holds about a 500 vote lead for the Progressive Conservative Party. Way too early to call that on the basis of a third.
Tough candidate, though. He's the OPP Association president.
Here's another one
Lots of
where,
profile.
again, Liberal fortunes are not quite so strong. Lou Rinaldi's held that riding for 2 successive terms, but Rob Milligan for the Conservatives has an early lead there. That's one to watch. Going to be a long time before we decide that one.
It's also the deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario is in that riding.
Who is that?
Judy Smith-Torrey.
Judy Smith-Torrey, okay. Ajax Pickering, Joe Dixon, looks like he's on his way to holding this seat. Todd McCarthy, I know the Conservatives were very high on, but a quarter of the polls reporting here, he's got almost a 1,000 vote lead, does Joe Dixon in Ajax Pickering. Any more bellwether ridings to talk about here? Oak Ridges Markham, and we thought we were going to have to be watching this one bounce back and forth all night long. Not even 10% of the polls reporting yet. Helena Jasic now in the lead, but it is a slender lead, and we're going to keep our eye on this one. In Thornhill, what did I tell you about this one?
there's my
Bouncing back and
$5.
forth. Peter Sherman now in the lead. Norm Sterling's got his hand out. He wants his $5 back. Now Sherman is 400 votes up on Bernie Farber. I'm telling you, folks, this one's going to flip-flop all night long. In Etobicoke Centre, I'm interested to see how many votes Donna Cansfield gets tonight. Because in 2003, she got 22,000, and in 2007, she got 22,000. And what do you bet tonight she doesn't get 22,000? But we'll see. She's off to an early lead over her Conservative challenger. In Brampton-Springdale, once again, still way too close to call with a quarter of the polls reporting. Linda Jeffrey, the Natural Resources Minister, with an early lead over Pam Hundle, but that one is a long way from over. But the Liberals have got to like the trend they're seeing in the 905 right now. More bellwether ridings in Mississauga South. Tim Peterson won this one, David Peterson's brother, by 234 votes back in 2003. Then in 07, he crossed the floor, got disenchanted with the Liberals, crossed to the Tories. Charles Sousa beat him, and Sousa looks like he's going to hang on to that riding. He's got about a 1,000 vote lead. These two guys were on our show on Monday night. We did our agenda on the road show in Mississauga Monday night. Charles Sousa and Jeff Janisic did some good battling, some good debating on the air that night, but Sousa's got, with about a quarter of the polls reporting, a 1,000 vote lead so far, too early to call. In Hamilton East Stony Creek, I don't think it's going to be as tough for Cousin Paul tonight. Cousin Paul's out to a 2,000 vote lead over his Liberal challenger Mark Cripps. Paul Miller only winning that seat by 1,000 votes last time. In London Fanshawe, a traditional great three-way fight. Look where the Liberal is. In third place, Khalil Ramal. It is the New Democrat, Teresa Armstrong, who's in first place. This is a seat when the NDP does well, they win.
It's, yes, it's sort of the working class part of London, and Teresa Armstrong is a well-known candidate, a well-known activist at the municipal level. And so I think you've got the combination of the right dynamics, and I think you're going to see some Andrea Horvath effect there too.
And it's also the riding where Cheryl Miller kind of crapped on her leader yesterday or the day before, so
She,
it wasn't.
the Conservative candidate,
yes,
said, I'm liked at the door, but the leader isn't.
The leader isn't, and he just left the room.
Speaking
so.
of leaders, let's take a look here at how the leaders are doing this evening as the Liberals trend towards a majority government, but they're still 4 seats short. Dalton McGinty, in his own riding of Ottawa South, put a check mark beside that. He'll be going back to Queen's Park, at the very least, as the member for the Ontario Legislature for that riding. Tim Hudak will keep Niagara West Glanbrook. He won the seat by 10,000 last time. He's not going to have any trouble hanging on to it tonight. And Andrea Horvath in Hamilton Centre's got a huge lead over all of her competitors combined. Andrea Horvath will maintain that seat for the New Democrats in Hamilton Centre. In Simcoe Grey, there's Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party, down in 4th place. Victoria, this is the safest Conservative seat in the province, or certainly one of them, and it was going to be a tall mountain for Mike to climb for him to get up it, and it's not
I'm
happening.
actually really surprised because usually what happens in that type of riding is that if you know that the Conservative's going to win, then people don't have a strategic vote. You know, they just vote for who they think, and because Mike is not doing that well, that's not a good sign for him.
Let's check and see how the cabinet ministers from the McGinty government are doing this evening. 20 plus members of the Ontario cabinet. And let's check on Hamilton Mountain. Sophia Agilanides, we're not ruling her out of this yet, but she's a couple of thousand votes behind with half the polls reporting. That's a lot of votes to make up with only half the polls still to hear from. In Sudbury, what is Bartolucci now? Corrections Minister Rick Bartolucci is 600 votes behind Paul Lowenberg. It's a close race there. There's Chris Bentley, the Attorney General in London West. Probably put a check mark beside him. He'll be going back to Queen's Park, will the Attorney General.
Actually, Rick Bartolucci is Minister of Municipal Affairs and
Municipal
Housing.
Affairs. Thanks for the help on that. Okay. In Scarborough-Guildwood, Margaret Best, Public Health Minister. She's got a big lead, 2-1 over Gary Ellis. In St. Catharines, Norm, you remember this guy, don't you?
Oh, there he is. Our
Look
Jim.
how tight this is, though.
Yeah.
Jim Bradley, who was elected for the first time in 1977, along with the aforementioned Norm Sterling, has only a 300-vote lead over his Conservative challenger in St. Catharines.
He'll be a bit cranky right now.
On Etobicoke Lakeshore, Laurel Broughton has got a 2-1 lead over Simon Nyilassi from the Progressive Conservative Party. Laurel Broughton in good shape so far on the Lakeshore. Michael Chan, the tourism minister up in Markham Unionville, has got about a 2-1 lead over his Conservative challenger. I think this is Michael Chan's third election in 5 years. He had a by-election, then a general, and now another general. In Ottawa West Nepean, Bob Shirelli, the infrastructure minister, with a narrow lead over Randall Denley of the Conservatives. That's the former columnist for the Ottawa Citizen, who's pretty cranky about the McGinty government. Look at this in Prince Edward Hastings. That's the education minister, Leona Dombrowski, who's 1,000+ votes behind her Conservative challenger. Ms. Dombrowski was in this TV station about 2 weeks ago doing an event at which she said, "I win because Tories vote for me." It looks like the Tories are voting for Tories tonight. In Scarborough Centre, Brad Dogood, the energy minister. Now, this is interesting. If this energy policy is so god-awful and everybody hates it, Jim, how come he's got a 2.5 to 3-1 lead over his Conservative challenger?
Well,
No-
Brad's
no-
a
no
classic
windmills.
Scarborough guy.
He's a Scarborough guy.
No windmills in his riding.
That is true. In Windsor-Tecumseh, the Minister of Finance, Dwight Duncan, will be going back to Queen's Park. As the Minister of Finance, we don't know, but certainly as the member for Windsor-Tecumseh. Kingston and the Islands, John Garrettson, with almost a 2-1 lead over his New Democratic Party challenger. To see the Tories doing third place in Kingston, that's unusual. Let's keep going. More cabinet ministers for the McGinty government. Thunder Bay Superior North, Michael Gravel has a 1,000-vote lead over his New Democratic Party challenger. And that's one that he barely squeaked by last time. In St. Paul's, the riding we're in tonight, Eric Hoskins, no surprise here. Eric Hoskins won this seat by 20%. Michael Bryant won it by 20%. It's a very safe Liberal riding. Brampton-Springdale, still too close to call, but a third of the polls reporting. A 1,000-vote lead for Linda Jeffrey over Pam Hundle, although the lead appears to be getting wider as the evening progresses. In London North Centre, the Health Minister, Deb Matthews, again in a tight three-way race, although the opposition, Howard, as you indicated, are evenly splitting their votes between the New Democrats and the Progressive Conservatives. Deb Matthews looks pretty safe to return to Queen's Park after tonight. In the riding of Ottawa-Vanier, there's the Community and Social Services Minister, Madeleine Meilleur, with a 2-1 lead over her Conservative challenger, so she looks set to go back to Queen's Park as well. In the riding of Kitchener Centre, John Malloy. This is always a tough race. He only won this by 1,000 votes last time. John Malloy is the Training Colleges and Universities Minister, and this is a seat that's very much bellwether. And Jim, as much effort as the Liberals have put in, keep this one up for a second, Michael, as much effort as the Liberals have put into making post-secondary a signature part of their platform, to see their colleges and universities minister trailing, admittedly a third of the polls reporting, that's got to hurt.
Yeah, that one's that one. There was a poll a couple of weeks ago. It raised some eyebrows, but it had both Liz Whitmer, which no one believed in peril, but it had Malloy in some difficulty too, and it looks like he might be in
But I
tough
don't
there.
think it's an indictment on our policy of, university post-secondary education. I mean, he's in a tough race. It's always been a tough race in that particular riding.
The guy who's beating him, I think, is the weatherman and the local station down there, and he got in a bit of hot water during the campaign for raising questions as to whether humanity had been at all responsible for
Climate change?
Climate change, yeah, and he was sounding like one of the Tea Partiers, but seems to be doing pretty well.
There you go. Let's check out some of the other tight races that are happening across the province as the Liberals look at the bottom of the screen. 4 seats shy of a majority government right now, but those 4 seats look like pretty slim pickings tonight. In Huron-Bruce, again, this is a rural seat that the Liberals were quite fortunate, frankly, to pick up over the last couple of elections. It's mostly, has been, I think, Norm, fair to say, most of the time a Conservative seat. Lisa Thompson is leading at the moment, but it is too early to call this one, but she has an early lead over Carol Mitchell of the Liberals. In Toronto Centre, where the polls stayed open a half an hour longer, no surprise here, Glenn Murray with about a 2-to-1 lead over Cathy Crowe. Cathy's run, I think, a few times for the NDP.
Second time.
Second time? Okay. And she runs for, did she run for city council once or something? I seem to remember her
She
name
did
3
run
times on a
municipally
ballot.
once,
In Mississauga South, there's the Labour Minister Charles Sousa still leading his Conservative challenger Jeff Janicek. These are all close races. In Mississauga, Arundel, rather controversial Cabinet Minister Harinder Thakkar, who has been demoted about as often as you can be demoted without being kicked out of Cabinet entirely. He's got a slim lead over David Brown, so that one's too early to call. How about this in Perth Wellington? 200 votes separating John Wilkinson, Mr. HST as we call him. He was the revenue minister who brought in the HST. His Conservative challenger, Randy Pettipies, now leading that one. How about Norma, historically, that's usually a pretty safe Conservative seat, hasn't it been?
Yeah, Bert Johnson used to be from that area, and he was a very popular.
Actually, in the last 20 years, it's flipped from the Liberals to the NDP to the Conservatives to the Liberals.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's do one more Cabinet Minister and see how they're doing. In Don Valley West, sure, checkmark beside Kathleen Wynne with a 4,800 vote lead over Andrea Mandel-Campbell. Look at this tight race on Toronto Danforth. Now 3 polls reporting,
Too early.
but way too early to tell. But remember, Peter Tabbins, this is should be one of the safest NDP seats in Toronto. Peter Tabbins has held it for a couple of elections now. But Marisa Sterling, who got the nomination 2 weeks before before the writs were dropped, and has really barnstormed the neighborhood, worked her fanny off, I got to say, and early returns, but close.
Good candidate. She's an engineer. The engineers were coming out in support of her. My brother lives in the riding. I used to live in the riding. It's changed a lot. It's not really the Maryland Shirley riding anymore that it was, and before that. Who is that white-haired older gentleman who represented it forever?
David Revel.
Yes. But it's changed a lot, and I think that
Look at this, folks. Look at this one.
I think we're in for an exciting race there as well as here.
Trinity Spadina, this one's got to go. If it stays this way, this will go down as a shocker. Rosario Marchese, who's represented that riding for 21 years, being bested at the moment. Now, take a look, though. Only a quarter of the polls reporting. Bested at the moment by about 600 votes by Sarah Thompson, the one-time mayoralty candidate in the city of Toronto. I can tell you something. That I had heard from good sources that the Liberals were giving up on Sarah Thompson, that they had taken headquartered resources away from her campaign because, frankly, they thought that she just didn't have a chance and they wanted to put their resources into a place they thought they had a better shot. They're going to be shocked by how competitive those results are tonight.
I don't know where your sources are, though, because I was told as of like 2 days ago that this was really competitive and that Rosie was in trouble.
In both of those ridings, it depends on where those polls are. Yeah. If those polls are north of Bloor or north of Danforth, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be very surprised if they were south of the Danforth.
Unless they're the new condos. The new condos could be
Although Rosario Marchese has done some incredible work in those new condominium developments.
Liberals 2 seats shy of a majority right now. We thought this seat was going to be tight, not as tight as last time. Here's Thunder Bay Atikokan, where Bill Morrow won by 50 votes last time. Still only got about a 260 vote lead over his new Democratic Party challenger. But that one's almost over. There's only 50 polls to hear from there. And we knew this one would go back and forth as well, although Laura Albanese has got about almost a 300 vote lead over Paul Ferreira. But again, this riding in the northwest part of Toronto, way too early to call. We've still got half the polls to hear from. And this one has gone back and forth so many times over the last few years. 53 Liberal seats right now, folks. 1 short of a majority, 53. This one's going to go down to the wire tonight, no question about it.
Okay, Steve, there's 2 of us from the north here out of 5. I think you got to show some northern ridings. I know Howie and I are both starting to just chomp at the bit.
Okay, control
northeast, a little northeast. Control room, help us out.
Nick wants to know how Nipissing is faring tonight because she only won that seat by 300 votes last time.
This is also close. Glengarry Prescott Russell.
And she's wondering. Let's continue on to put up some more of the tight races here across the province of Ontario. 54 seats needed for a majority. The Liberals are at 53. Here's Glengarry Prescott Russell, which the Liberals have traditionally won by big numbers. And at the moment, this was Jean-Marc Lalonde's seat. It's an open seat now. A very slim lead there for Grant Crack for the Liberal Party. Let's continue to look at our tight races around the province of Ontario tonight. In the riding of Nipissing, there you go.
There we go.
This is not that tight. Monique, you left, they couldn't hold it. Vic Fideli, the former very popular mayor of North Bay, looks pretty much set to go to Queen's Park as the new MPP there. Is that why you didn't run again there?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, actually,
Monique?
truth be told, Vic approached us to run for the Liberals. He'll be a handful for Mr. Hudak in whatever capacity he finds himself. So
Mr. Hudak doesn't have enough hands for all the
exactly.
hands.
He's going to have a busy time in
I
opposition.
think the PCs had that one in
Look
the
at this
bank.
one. Now John Wilkinson's back on top by, less than 30 votes. This thing's going to go to the wire tonight. Half the polls reporting in Perth, Wellington. That one's going to go back and forth all night long. The Liberals 1 seat shy of a majority. In Parkdale High Park, this is a lot tighter than most of the folks that I think thought it would be. Sherry DeNovo of the NDP, who's one of their more popular members, but only a 500 vote lead on Courtney Pasternak. Some of us are old enough to remember when this was a Conservative seat and a New Democrat seat and then a Gerard Kennedy seat for the Liberals. This seat bounces around and it's very unpredictable. But Pasternak, one would not have thought, would have been as competitive with Sherry DeNovo, who's got a good ground game and has been extremely high profile.
Former journalist, right?
Yep.
Courtney?
I'm noticing that all the people who were on this program
Are doing okay.
are doing really well tonight.
Wow, Steve.
Wonder if there's a connection
you could
there.
be the kingmaker.
Oak Ridge's Markham moving right along. Helena Jasic, again, look at how short, that's a 500 vote lead, very tight, with a third of the polls reporting in Oak Ridge's Markham, one of those 905 ridings that's too close to call. How about this? We had Jagmeet Singh on twice in the past week,
Yes.
and he's in first place right now. You want to say that again?
I'm starting to worry
agenda
about,
as the
about
kingmaker?
the influence you have.
Bramalee Gore Moulton. There's a Liberal former sitting member, Kuldip Kular, who is in second place right now. Jagmeet Singh is, quite frankly,
The young guy looks like a terrific candidate.
he's a very appealing candidate. Yep. And at the moment, he's got a lead. Remember, he ran earlier this year in the same riding for the federal election and came within 500 votes of stealing that one away. In the riding of Simcoe Grey, no surprise here. This is a huge runaway for Jim Wilson. He'll go back to Queen's Park, a former health minister in Mike Harris's government. Jim Wilson returning to Queen's Park
Hopefully get a better picture taken.
with most of the polls. Come on, Nick, be nice.
Aw,
Be
Jim.
niceness.
You didn't take it?
I know, but he could find
Folks,
a better one.
I got to point out, they're at
We picked the
54
number.
right now. It's early. Where are we at? It's only after 10 o'clock, and no one's calling this one yet, trust me. But 54 is the magic number. 54 Liberal seats right now gets Dalton McGinty his third consecutive majority government. But we're a long way from wanting to do that. The Conservatives are up 11 seats from last time. The New Democrats are up 7 seats from last time, and still no green breakthrough. But if you're Dalton McGinty right now, have you got any nails left at all, or have you chewed them all off? 54. They are right on the razor's edge of a third consecutive majority government. Where are we going next, guys? What do we want to check out next?
Some more.
Let's do this.
Online, they're saying on Dalton McGinty's party that everybody's really tense.
Well, they ought to be. Look at the numbers. In Northumberland, Quinte West, this was a former Liberal seat for 2 terms, now looking like it's going to trend towards the Conservatives. Only a quarter of the polls reporting, so too early to say. In Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, that's a loss for the Liberals.
Wow.
Now, the former sitting member, Jim Brownell, did not run again, so open seat. Weird things can happen. The Liberals are running third there now. NDP second in Eastern Ontario, but the Tories take it. In Prince Edward Hastings, the Education Minister, Leona Dombrowski, is in big trouble in her riding. Todd Smith, for the Conservatives, looks like he's set to make a rookie appearance at Queen's Park. Too early to call. It's only 2,000 vote difference right now. We're not prepared to call that one. Also in the category, all right, let's look at the Central Ontario ridings. The Conservatives are leading and elected in 10. The Liberals leading and elected in 4. NDP and Greens shut out in that part of the province. This is a part of the province, though, where the Liberals had done very well in the last couple of elections, and that's why they came in with, I think, 72 seats the last time, 73 the time before, down to 54 tonight. In Barrie, this is again an open seat. Eileen Carroll not running again, but the Conservatives have the early lead with half the polls reporting. In Bruce Grey Owen Sound, this is a Conservative keeper, Bill Murdoch's old seat. Keep this one in the Conservative column. Still in Central Ontario. In Cambridge, this is one of those great races which all 3 parties have represented over the past decade and a half. It was a Conservative seat, Jerry Martinyuk deciding not to run again, and at the moment, Rob Leone from the Conservatives has a 1,000-vote lead over the Liberals, but Norm, we're not calling this one yet, right?
And
Half the polls reporting.
I think
Too
that's
early.
one of the ones where we're looking at splits again because the NDP are looking pretty strong as well. So
Yeah, I would think it looks pretty good there for us.
For the Conservatives.
Yeah, I mean,
it's always a three-way fight.
Yeah, Jerry used to win by about 3,000 votes. So,
Always tight. Here in Guelph, Liz Sandals, who's had 2 terms for the Grits, looks like she's set to go back. Guelph is also one of those good three-way fights, but she at the moment is on top of the leaderboard. How about this one? Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock. This is where John Tory tried to make his return to politics after losing on election night in 2007. He lost the by-election to Rick Johnson. Could be a brief stay at Queen's Park. Laurie Scott represented the riding before, and she looks like she's set to return to Queen's Park. We showed you this one earlier. Huron-Bruce, Carol Mitchell in big trouble to hang on to that seat for the Liberals.
It's my riding.
Rural Ontario going back to the Conservatives. In Kitchener Centre, John Malloy. Look how tight that is. It's fewer than 100 votes. John Malloy, the Training Colleges and Universities Minister, up by fewer than 100 votes. We're not going to call that one for ages. Also in Central Ontario, Kitchener-Conestoga, Mike Harris. Not the Mike Harris, but Leanna Pendergast's Mike Harris. These two have gone against each other. This will be the second consecutive election, and Michael Harris has an early 1,300 vote lead with half the polls reporting. Conestoga was always a tough call for the Liberals. Jim, you know Leanna quite well. You wrote about her, actually, in your last feature piece in the paper. One of those appealing candidates, but who may be in tough tonight.
Yeah, that's a Conservative riding, and there's a big rural component of it, and it's one of those indicator ridings. If she wins that one, you're probably looking at a Lib majority tonight. If she doesn't, it's a better night for the Tories.
We saw Liz Whitmer in, Perry Muskoka, no surprise here. Norm Miller's going back to Queen's Park. He's got a big lead over the others. Perth Wellington, well, it's flipped again. Now the Conservatives are in first place by 16 votes. 16 votes. This one's going to go back and forth all night long, folks, in Perth Wellington. In Peterborough, this is the bellwether riding. Win Peterborough, you win the province. At the moment, Jeff Leal of the Liberals is leading, and the Liberals are sitting right at 54 on a majority government. But of course, it's way too early to call this. Simcoe Grey, we told you, Jim Wilson is going back to Queen's Park. Big win there for him. In Simcoe North, not so tight. We can put a check mark beside that one, friends. Garfield Dunlop will return to Queen's Park for the Progressive Conservatives. Also, now, we're going to go up north now? I know our group up here, our group out here wants to see what's going on. We've got 2 northern members here, 2 former northern members who want to see what's happening. And Norm wants to see what's happening in Carleton, Mississippi Mills as well, his old riding, where he tried for and lost the nomination to Jack McLaren, who was part of Randy Hillier's Tea Party, and he wants to see whether or not McLaren's been able to keep the riding blue, as it has been under Mr. Sterling's tutelage for the past 34 years. We'll see what's happening tonight. There, the Liberals have slipped back now, 53. You know, if they're at 53,
they actually have a majority.
they kind of do, don't they?
Yeah.
Why? Explain that. Why is that?
Well, if you have 53, you elect the speaker. From the other side, and if the speaker has to vote on a tie, if it was 53, he votes in favor of keeping the bill going, keeping the government going, and that kind of thing.
He's obliged to.
Yeah.
He's obliged to. I mean, if it was a rogue speaker, he could be a problem, but.
Parliamentary tradition would dictate that he.
Let me ask something heretical here. Jim, if it were 53 and 54 is a majority, how hard would the Liberals try to get to, to bribe somebody on the other side to cross the floor?
Oh, I think his
I believe I said bribe, yeah.
Wow.
I think history records that happens not infrequently. I'm just trying to think where they'd reach over.
David Ramsey.
David
Came over in
Ramsey. David
85.
Ramsey did. We can think federally of Belinda Stronach, Paul Martin to save the day.
So it would not be completely unknown for it to happen.
No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
you wanted to know how Carleton, Mississippi Mills is doing? Let's bring it up.
I don't know if
There's
I
the
wanna
race right now,
they don't
and Jack
wanna know.
McLaren has a 3,200 vote lead on his
Wow.
Liberal challenger. So it looks like, Mr. Sterling, your seat with half the polls reporting will stay in the blue category, although not with you.
But Tim's future looks more and more interesting, doesn't it?
He's got an interesting problem with cohesion there. Now, he's got strands of Harperites, he's got strands of Red Tories, he's got strands of the Hillierites. It's going to be an interesting act for him.
Let's go up north. Northern Ontario, let's see, we got 2 former Northern MPPs here in the riding of Algoma, Manitoulin. Mike Brown, we suggested earlier in the evening, was going to be in trouble. He's been the MPP there since 1987, but the NDP are going to win this seat tonight in Algoma, Manitoulin. Continuing our look across the north, in Thunder Bay, Atikokan, another close race, 400 votes separating Bill Morrow and his New Democratic Party challenger. There are still, though, look at that, 121 of 150 polls to report. So even though you'd think 400 votes is enough to call it, it's not. We're just not sure yet, and we're frankly not in a rush.
Again, where are those 400 400 votes coming from?
In the riding of Sudbury, look how tight this is. It's a 500 vote difference now between Paul Lowenberg and Rick Bartolucci. Bartolucci, the senior cabinet minister in the McGinty government, who had been well behind earlier in the evening. We still have 43 polls to hear from in that riding, you know, and now the Liberals are down to 52. As more numbers come in, as more returns come in, the Liberals' numbers seem to be dropping. So we're at 52 Liberal seats right now. They're too shy of a majority government. 38 Liberals, Progressive Conservative seats, 17 New Democrats. The Liberals came into tonight with 70. It looks like they're going to keep the government, but they've lost a lot of good members in the process. In Chatham, Kent, Essex, in southwestern Ontario, this is again a former Liberal seat which now looks like it will fall into the Conservatives' hands. This is a trend we saw in the federal election campaign. Was this, remind me, Chatham, Kent, Essex?
Pat Hoy.
This is Pat Hoy's riding. Pat used to win that by 20,000, routinely. And look how tight it is tonight. In the riding of Elgin, Middlesex, London, we're calling this now. This is Steve Peters, the former Speaker of the Legislature, his old riding, a loss from the Liberals to the Conservatives. That one is a Conservative pickup. In the riding of Essex, once again, this is Crozier's old riding. Bruce Crozier. One of the saddest stories anyway. Bruce Crozier deciding to step down after a great career in public life, and 2 days later, after deciding to retire and spend more time with his grandkids, he drops dead and dies of a heart attack. Very sad story, but an open seat, and he was a Liberal, and the Liberals are not in the top two here. This is in southwestern Ontario, in Essex.
But federally, this is a riding where New Democrats and Conservatives went head-to-head.
Right.
And Taras Natashek, a tremendous young guy. He's run now, I think this is the third time he's run, twice federally, once provincially. And
Three times maybe the
comes from a very activist family. The mom, the dad, the whole family, tremendously involved.
Let's continue to look as the Liberals sit 2 seats shy of a majority government. This one, I'm telling you, folks, is going to go down to the wire. Hard to remember. It's been, I think, since 1985, since we saw an election where we just weren't sure how this thing was going to turn out. 53 Liberal seats right now. They're just nudging up against the edge of a majority government. You need 54 seats in a 107-member legislature to get through. 37 Tories. That's up 12 from where they were on election night 4 years ago. So Tim Hudak can say that he improved the party's fortunes. And the NDP up 7. As a percentage of their seats, they've done the best tonight. Up 7 from where they were 4 years ago tonight.
I think they'd be disappointed with that, though. I think they've been looking for something more. I would expect 20 would be what they would have reasonably expected.
Any way we can show leading and elected for the whole province?
Let's see what we can do on that.
Okay.
Leading and elected for the whole province, guys? We're getting it. Here in, it's still, you know what? Color the 416 red, everybody. Don Valley West, Kathleen Wynne with a 2-to-1 win over Andrea Mandel Campbell. In Scarborough Centre, Brad Dogood with a 2-to-1 win over Carol Williams. She was on our rookies program. I guess we didn't help her that much. In St. Paul's, 2-to-1 win again for Dr. Eric Hoskins, the citizenship minister, over Christine McGurr. Liberals sweeping Toronto. In Don Valley East, the Tories really thought they had a shot at this one. This is David Kaplan's old riding.
He's a good guy.
Michael Cotto, yes. I think Greg Sobera told me Michael Cotto was their best new candidate, and he's got a 2-to-1 lead over the Conservatives, stays in the Liberal column. Donna Cansfield with a 5,000 vote lead, almost 5,000 vote lead over her Conservative challenger, with more than half the polls reporting in Etobicoke Centre. In Scarborough, Guildwood still continue to call it red. That's another senior police officer on the Toronto force, also named Gary for that matter, who's running for the Conservatives out there. But that one's staying red tonight. We'll start to put some check marks on these guys. In Willowdale, once again, put a check mark beside that one. David Zimmer is going to hold that seat for the Liberals over Vince Agavino of the Progressive Conservatives. In Pickering, Scarborough East, this is the one riding in that actually straddles the 416 and the 905. Tracy McCharles over Kevin Gaudette. He was, Norm, I think the Taxpayers Federation guy, who was a big star candidate.
Big star candidate for the Tories, yeah.
But not enough votes in Pickering, Scarborough East for the Conservatives tonight.
That was Wayne Arthur's riding.
In Etobicoke North, boy, that's the safest Liberal seat in the whole city right now. They held it federally. Shafiq Qadri holds it provincially by 3-to-1 margin. In the riding of Scarborough Rouge River, Baz Balkasoon came in on a by-election. Won 2 generals now. That's pretty close still, but we're going to hold off calling that one. It's still about a 1,500 vote lead, but we're not going to call that one yet. In York West, Carlene Nation was on this program on our ex-journalist show, saying that she was picking up at the door that everybody hated Mario Sergio and wanted him out.
I think she was wrong.
She even compared him to, well, the Tories traditionally run in 3rd place there, and I think Ms. Nation is in 3rd place again tonight.
I don't think they got 3,000 votes last time.
Pretty sure they didn't get. They got 10% of the vote last time, in 2007. So the Liberals still like Toronto. In Toronto Centre, a 2-to-1 margin for the Innovation Minister Glenn Murray over Cathy Crowe. In Don Valley East, we put that one up already. 2-1 for Michael Coteau over Michael Lendy. In Eglinton Lawrence, wow, look at this one. That flipped big time.
Now I'm getting my $5.
A third of the polls reporting Mike Cole with a huge lead over Rocco Rossi.
He's a wily old veteran, isn't he?
He is.
Well, I'll tell you what, when Rossi ran in that riding, liberals everywhere said, Mike, we're coming to help you, because Rocco Rossi, frankly, was a bit of a lightning rod.
Yeah.
And at one-third of the polls reporting only, still two-thirds to hear from, so we're not calling this one yet,
No,
even though
that'll
it's 1,600
continue to
vote
be a
difference.
great fight.
That's another one where it depends on where those polls are coming from.
Here's what's happening across the province of Ontario. The Liberals are off 17 seats. The Tories are up 12, the New Democrats are up 7, no Green breakthrough tonight. So yes, Dalton McGinty is still going to be the Premier after tonight, but he's going to have a dramatically reduced caucus, which actually, Howard, is not necessarily a bad thing. He might like that, as long as he can, as long as he's close to a majority.
Fewer egos to manage.
You said the same thing when you left, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember asking you, what's the best thing about not being the leader anymore? And you said fewer egos to manage.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
And there weren't even that many bodies.
Tim Hudak in opposition is going to have a lot of egos to manage, so it's going to be an interesting time in the House for sure.
Well, he doesn't have to manage me.
No, that's true. One of the biggest troublemakers is taking his leave. There you go.
Let's take a look across the regions of the province to see what the gains and losses have been. We'll put that one up. In the 416, the Liberals actually gain a seat. The New Democrats gain a seat. Nothing for the Conservatives still. 1999 was the last time they won a seat in Toronto. They haven't won anything in 03, 07, or 11 so far. In the 905, one gain, one loss, virtually no change. The NDP picking up a seat in the 905. Let's find out where that one is, Stacey. I'd like to know where the NDP... Oh, that's Jagmeet Singh, right, Bramalea Gore-Malton. In Central Ontario, big pickup at the expense of the Liberals for the Progressive Conservatives. 5 Liberal seats lost, Tories picking them all up. Elsewhere across the province, in the East, Norm Sterling, your old turf, 3 pickups for the Conservatives, once again, at the expense of the Liberals. Let's continue our look. In Hamilton, Niagara, the NDP pick up a seat at the expense of the Liberals. That'd be the seat on Hamilton Mountain. The rest of the area looks status quo. In the Northeast, 2 gains for the NDP, 1 gain for the Conservatives. I'd like to find out where that one is.
Oh, the Conservatives.
That's Nipissing, right.
Timiskaming and Cochrane would be one of the, would be Ramsey's one.
All
the
at
NDP.
the
I don't know
expense
what
of
the
the
other
Liberals.
NDP is.
We'll find out what that is in the
Sudbury.
Northeast.
Yeah, Sudbury,
Oh,
I guess.
Sudbury, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the Southwest, look at this. The Southwest, which wasn't very kind to the Conservatives over the last 2 elections, has been tonight. Leading in 4, elected in 2 for a pickup of 6 at the expense of 5 Liberal seats and 2 New Democrat seats. So that's the way the 13 ridings in the Southwest look. 6 Liberals, 5 Progressive Conservatives, 2 New Democrats. In the Northwest, a loss of 1 seat for the Liberals, and the NDP picked it up in the Northwest. What else we got going on here? So far, early. Yes, we're not throwing in the towel on anything yet here. Okay, 53 Liberal seats so far this evening. That is 1 shy of a majority government. It's effectively a majority government, but I'll tell you what it doesn't do. It doesn't let Dalton McGinty say, I'm the first Premier in 52 years to three-peat, because he didn't win them back-to-back majority governments.
Yeah.
So Leslie
now
Frost
now it's up to 54 again.
Well, there it is. Okay. If it's at 54, he can say it.
It's 54, he can, exactly. It changes
54
every
he
5
can.
minutes.
Let's check and see some of these seats that were previously held by one party that now may be going orange. Shall we check those out? Here's Davenport.
Right.
Rosario Marchese guaranteed 101%. He told me that this seat was going to go NDP.
That's tighter than a lot of New Democrats would have expected, I think.
Yeah.
I think
500 vote difference. Tony Ruprecht held this seat for 30 years for the Liberals, so it is an open seat.
No
Nobody
one
there.
can figure out what he did with it, though.
He kept winning it. Hamilton Mountain. Well, you put a check mark beside that one, folks. 193 polls reporting out of 212. Monique Taylor is going to Queen's Park. Sophia Aguilanides will be defeated. That's one McGinty cabinet minister going down tonight. Temiskaming Cochrane. This is a seat that David Ramsey barely won last time, going to the NDP this time. Tell us about John Vantoff.
John Vantoff is a real agricultural activist. He's been very active in the milk producers, very active in the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and also a real community activist in that part of Ontario. He came very close to defeating David Ramsey last time.
300 votes.
He ran last time. He just kept running, actually. I mean, he's been very high profile. And Denis Bonnet was a great candidate, lovely guy, teacher, very, he got out to, it's a big riding, and he was moving
Kind of
all
completes
summer
the
long.
circle since David was elected as a New Democrat there in 1985.
You are correct, sir. That is right. Let's just do a quick shout out to the folks at the Ossington Bar down at Ossington and Queen. Hi, guys. We're glad you're watching our coverage tonight. We're hoping that the beer is flowing freely and that you're enjoying yourselves as you are watching really one for the history books this evening. 54 Liberal seats. They are right on the majority government right now. They haven't got one to spare. 54 grits, that's a majority government. 36 for the Progressive Conservatives, 17 for the NDP. A lot of Liberal losses tonight. They could afford to lose 16 seats and still have a majority. They have lost 16 seats exactly and still got their majority, but we're not calling it yet. It's too early to call it. And a reminder, you just saw all the websites there. Go to yourvote2011.ca and you can check out what's going on in your riding. Jim, you wanted to say? At least I thought you wanted to say. Okay, maybe not.
No, I was just sort of, I'm gobsmacked by the whole turn of events. It's that it would play out right on the edge like this. And there's so many of these ridings that are, they really are three-way splits and tight races that are hard. They're going to be back and forth for a while yet.
One of the interesting things too, Steve, is that the voting was different this time than it's ever been before. And that is, even before nomination day, you could go to the returning office and vote. You do a write-in ballot. And it's an odd kind of a process because somebody's not nominated and you write in their name, you know, what does it mean? As well, there's mail-in ballots, and these two parts will come in very, very late in the process, and they could make a difference in terms of.
Here's Burlington, which Cam Jackson used to win by 10 and 20,000 votes. It's a 1,000 vote difference right now, so we're not going to call this, even though there are still 60 polls to hear from, only a 1,000 vote lead for Jane McKenna, who had perhaps the most unfortunate quote out of anybody in the whole campaign. I believe she was the candidate who, during an interview, said, "Since when did we become for immigrants in this party?" And that was not a wise thing to say. It's a very tight race there this evening. Jane McKenna with a 1,000 vote lead over her Liberal challenger. In Cambridge, this would be, if it maintains, but look, it's too close to call. 1,400 vote lead for the Conservatives, Rob Leone. That was a Conservative seat, still held on by the Conservatives, but it's too early to call. We are calling this group of ridings turning blue with a question mark. Carlton, Mississippi Mills, I think you can take the question mark off this one, gang. This is a Conservative keeper. That one's gone. That's Norm Sterling's old seat staying Conservative. In Chatham, Kent, Essex, in southwestern Ontario, this is a loss for the Liberals, turning blue. That one looks like it's going Conservative. Elgin, Middlesex, London, once again, turning blue. That one going from the Liberals to the Conservatives. Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, another seat that was Liberal, turning blue. So that is a theme that is happening across much of rural Ontario. Monique, what's happening to the Liberal vote in rural Ontario?
Well, you know, I mean, it's not, we weren't predicting the 70 that we came in with, and so, you know, there have to be some losses in some places, and it's disappointing, but you know, I still believe we're going to be in there with our majority, and we'll continue to do the good things we've been doing in healthcare and education.
Victoria, the thinking, I think, was that if you've got a energy or a gas plant in the GTA and you don't like it, the Premier will cancel it. But if you got a lot of windmills up in rural Ontario, tough luck. Maybe that's why the Liberals are maybe the voters are turning their backs on the Liberals in parts of the province?
Yeah, like at the Walkerton debate, the Walkerton jail was a really big issue for people as well in Huron-Bruce because of the closing. And there's been a lot of issues. It is a very, like, if you're going to be a Liberal and be elected in Huron-Bruce, you really need to be a blue Liberal. You know, like it's a different riding. They have it's agriculture, manufacturing, and energy are the main things, and you have to really be playing to those if you're going to win.
Let me just ask Stacey in the control room. I know we're going to go to political veterans in close fights, and boy, look at how close that one is for a guy who's been in the House for 34 years. Jim Bradley, first elected in '77, has only a 1,400 vote lead on his Conservative challenger. Still 36 polls to hear from, though. Is that right? Yeah, 36 polls to hear from. These are veterans. Let's also get a York Southwestern return up here as well. We want to see how that seat's doing.
He's my seatmate. He's determined. I have no doubt. There's Monty.
Here's Monty Quinter, elected, going back to Queen's Park once again, has won every election since 1985. If, and we assume when, Monty Quinter spends another year and 3 quarters in the Ontario legislature, he will be the oldest MPP ever. He's 80 years old. He turned 80 years old on the same day that William Shatner turned 80 years old, which was earlier this year in March. They're both octogenarians. He's certainly the oldest member of the Ontario
Keep that
legislature.
trivia in your head, Steve.
Look at this.
He and William
There's
Shatner.
just so much trivia in this head, you have no idea.
Wow.
Look at this one, folks.
This is looking better.
This is the rematch, and it is looking better for the Liberals, with still 50 polls to hear from. Laura Albanese looks set to win the rubber match, but we're not going to call that one yet. This seat has been won by a few hundred votes by both these candidates over the last few years.
That'll break some new Democrat hearts as well. I think they had that one
starting with
tipped
Paul
off.
Ferreira's.
Yes.
Okay, let's.
It's got to be a tough slog, though, 3 times in a row. I mean, it's tough when you face a different opponent every time. You kind of don't know what to expect, but the same one, I mean, it is such a grudge match, and it becomes so personal. That's really tough.
Let's see if we can get some of the returns up in York Region. I'd be curious to see how some of those real nail-biters, Newmarket, Aurora, Oak Ridges, Markham. I'm also curious to see how Greg Sorbera is doing in his riding of Vaughan.
Can we find out about Welland? My dear friend
find out
Peter
about Welland.
Kormos
That's
is
an open seat,
retired, and
yeah.
I'd just like to see what's going on there.
Welland is
Peter hasn't called you lately?
Welland's an open seat. We want to see what's going on there. Here are, well, how about that? Aren't these guys great? Ask and you shall receive.
That's a good news there
This
for
is
Greg.
this was a great story, this riding, because, of course, Tony Jenko, since he was a teenager, was a Liberal. Might have been mentored along the way by Greg Sorbera. Ran for the party in the federal election earlier this year against Julian Fantino, lost, liked Fantino, and flipped to the Conservatives, and then ran against Sorbera.
Well, there may be justice in the world after all. Perhaps he and Rocco Roski can commiserate over a beer.
Greg Sorbera, of course, the chair of the, I think I can say this, Greg Sorbera didn't want to run again. He had planned to retire. And he looked in the mirror and he said, I don't want the Conservatives to win, and if I don't do everything I possibly can to ensure that doesn't happen, I'll never be able to live with myself. So even though he's 65 years old, he ran again, and he wins.
Now, the worst part is, if it's that close in the end, and Dalton McGinty does form the government, Greg Sorbera will have to go to the legislature and vote.
Meaning what? You know,
Norm, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones.
are you suggesting there's going to be a by-election in Vaughan within a year?
I'm suggesting that it's going to be hell to be a government backbencher.
Maybe he'll get back in cabinet. Who knows? Okay, guys.
There won't be any free Thursdays.
No, he's talking about attendance, right? I mean, it's tough to get everybody there, and especially when you're in a slim majority, you got to have. I hats off to the next House leader and whip.
Let's bring up some more of these returns from north of the city, as the Liberals sit on 53 seats, one short of a majority. Here's Helena Jasic, and right now a more comfortable, but not yet there, 2,400 vote lead. Still with only 2/3 of the polls reporting, so we are a long way away from calling that one. In Oak Ridges, Markham. Let's see what else we've got out there. In Richmond Hill, Reza Maridi. Well, he's got a more comfortable lead here. I think you can put a check mark beside that one, guys.
Good man.
More than a 2,000 vote lead right now for Reza Maridi in Richmond Hill. So he'll probably be going back to Queen's Park. But I mean, it's interesting. The polls really have, as much as we've criticized what the polls have been saying over the last couple of weeks, Jim, the fact is the polls looked indecisive because I guess Ontarians have been indecisive, and this razor-thin, narrow margin of victory proves it.
Yeah. One of the things I'm beginning to think is that the Conservatives may, as they review their campaign, are going to be pretty frustrated because it seems like they made a lot of mistakes, and it looks like it might have been there for the taking. And had they run a better campaign, I think those numbers might have been a little different.
We know that 6 months ago, Stephen Harper won 73 seats in the province of Ontario. People may think of Harper as a Westerner. The fact is he's got more seats in Ontario than in any other province. And we want to do a little comparing and contrasting with what Stephen Harper did 6 months ago with what basically Tim Hudak's been able to do tonight. Has Hudak picked up any of those seats that were formerly Liberal? Let's check those out, as the Liberals sit 1 seat short of a majority government. Well, here's one of them. In Barrie, the Conservatives clinging to still a very narrow 1,500, 1,600 vote lead over their Liberal challenger. That would be a gain for the Conservatives if they can hold on to it. Where else are we going to go tonight? In the riding of, don't be shy, guys, help me out. Here we go, Chatham-Kent-Essex. That's a pickup once again. Another seat that went blue earlier this year goes blue tonight.
Nipissing would be one of them. We went blue by 19 in the federal campaign, and we've gone blue tonight. So
here's one again that was red before, going blue now. In other ridings of the province, as the Liberals still sit on 53, Halderman, Norfolk. We haven't heard from this one yet.
No.
Toby Barrett, who's been at the legislature since, I want to say 1990,
Feels like
95?
time began, but
Long time, anyway.
95.
95, okay. HKLB, Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock. Laurie Scott's going to go back to Queen's Park.
I'm actually really surprised, you know. I didn't think Laurie would be able to pull it off because people were so resentful when she gave up her seat to John Tory that there was a big backlash against John when he ran there. And Rick's been a really good local member. I'm actually surprised at these results. But Laurie's been working it
Her
hard.
dad was an MP there.
dad was
too.
an
They got,
MP
they got,
there.
fa-
Yeah,
they
I
got
think it was
family
her
roots.
uncle.
Was it her uncle?
No, it was her dad. It was her dad.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it was her dad. 3,000 seat lead for 3,000 vote lead rather in Huron-Bruce for the Conservative candidate Thompson over Mitchell in that one. Again, red going blue. In Kitchener-Conestoga, Mike Harris. We're going to have another Mike Harris in the Ontario legislature.
Wow.
Lefties are going to go nuts. 2,000 vote lead at the moment for Mike Harris over Leanna Pendergast. Leanna, the former sitting member there in that riding of Conestoga, has always been a pretty blue riding, which she managed to take the last time. But Mike Harris looks like he's set to go to Queen's Park. Lambton, Kent,
Wow.
Middlesex. That one's
That's
a
a
big time in the Conservative
Big
column.
disappointment.
Maria Van Bommel losing that one for the Liberals.
Monty McNaughton's been working so hard to get that. I mean, he's been at it for a couple of years. I mean, he just has worked and worked and worked. Local small businessman, people know him, trust him.
There's your old riding,
There's
Minnick
my
Smith.
old riding. This is interesting because the NDP really thought they'd get up to 7,000 to 8,000 in this one, and they didn't actually break through.
Almost a 2-to-1 victory for Vic Fideli over his Liberal challenger in this Nipissing riding. That's Mike Harris's old riding, incidentally. Northumberland, Quinte West, once again, this is a Conservative gain taken away from the Liberals. It's pretty
Not
close,
there
though.
yet, though.
500 votes. We're not calling it yet. This one we're calling. Prince Edward Hastings, there's another cabinet minister going down to defeat tonight. Leona Dombrowski, who said just a couple of weeks ago, I win because I'm in a Conservative riding and Tories like me and vote for me. Not this time. Leona Dombrowski, the education minister. Dalton McGinty's going to have to find himself a new education minister going down to defeat. Dombrowski's held that part of the province since 1999, but she loses tonight by almost 3,000 votes to the Progressive Conservative candidate. Sarnia Lambton, this was the one rookie the Conservatives managed to elect last time. Bob Bailey in the riding of Sarnia Lambton. He's got a big victory, 2-to-1 over his New Democratic Party challenger. Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry, once again. Red seats turning blue. That's part of the theme of tonight, although certainly the Liberals at 54, if they win the majority, will be the big story. That's the way it is right now. I know, friends, it is 10:30, and most election nights, when the polls have been closed for an hour and a half, we are able to tell you exactly what's going to happen, who's won. We know the Liberals are going to form the next government. Dalton McGinty, by virtue of having 54 seats at the moment, will have the right to recall the legislature. Seems unbelievable that Andrea Horvath and Tim Hudak would come to some kind of accord or deal in order to make Tim Hudak the premier. The gap is too big. 54 to 37 is too big. Norm, you're smiling. It's not on.
Well,
right?
That may not be on, but we also may have an election in a year or a year and a half or two. That's the other big thing about how razor thin this victory
Let's
is.
be clear. I don't think there's any chance of a deal.
No.
But
numbers.
I think back to the last legislature, and within a year, we're having a couple of by-elections.
Right. Absolutely good
And
point.
I look
Yeah.
at, I look at some of the people who got elected tonight. I think it's very likely we'll be seeing by-elections very soon.
Cabinet ministers in trouble, friends. That's our next theme for the evening. As the Liberals sit on 54, that's what you need for a majority. No room for error for the Liberals tonight. Carol Mitchell, cabinet minister in the McGinty government, in trouble in Huron-Bruce. Looking with 47 polls to go like she's going to go down. Wow. 100 vote difference now. 100 vote difference now for John Wilkinson, the former revenue minister, now the environment minister. Still too close to call. 30 polls still to hear from in Perth, Wellington. That could go either way. Prince Edward Hastings, we told you, the education minister Dombrowski loses tonight. Other cabinet ministers in trouble. In Sudbury, Rick Bartolucci. Look how close that is.
33. Oof.
That's a tight race, folks. 33 vote difference.
23 polls to go.
23 polls to go and a 33 vote difference. That is razor thin.
That is razor
Razor thin.
Yeah.
We should say your wife, Shelley Martell, used to hold that seat.
No.
No.
No, wait a second.
She
She
was,
was-
she was
From
always
Shelley
Sudbury East.
She was
and,
one over.
And Nickel Belt.
We haven't heard
Did
from
your
Nickel
father-in-law
Belt.
hold that seat?
No.
I'm over 2 here.
Sudbury,
They
there's
live in
always,
Sudbury.
No, there's always been a big difference between voting in Sudbury and the polls outside of Sudbury. The polls outside of Sudbury are primarily mining towns. Sudbury is primarily civil service, professional, and so
University.
yeah, and
Yeah.
university.
So the outlying areas have been traditionally NDP, but we haven't seen Nickel Belt at all tonight.
Wow,
Franche-Gélinas?
look how close this is, too.
Okay, let's check. These are Liberal New Democrat fights that we're going to go to next. Where are the? We've already checked out where the Tories have taken seats from the Liberals. Here are Liberal NDP fights, and look how close that one is now. That's 300 votes, guys, and we've still only got 2/3 of the polls reporting. This one's a long way from over. I know there were huzzas in some corners of the table tonight when Sarah Thompson's lead was very big. It's not very big anymore. And Howard, you pointed out, it depends where those returns are coming from. We still got a lot of polls to hear from, more than 100 polls still to hear from in Trinity Spadina this evening. Where are the other Liberal NDP battles? In Sudbury, which we just talked about.
Yep.
Bartolucci now. Look how close that is. It's like 40 votes. In York Southwestern, Albanese versus Ferreira. This one's always decided by just a few hundred either way. Right now, 500 votes, 514 vote difference between the Liberals and the NDP in York Southwestern. That's the northwest port of Toronto. Oh. In Bramalea Gormalton, this one's not still pretty close. 800 vote lead for the NDP. Jagmeet Singh, his second election this year. He came within 500 of winning it federally back in May 2nd. And Kuldip Kular, who's the former sitting member there.
Agenda attention.
You got to love a guy who was campaigning in the 905 on a bicycle.
As he was.
Yeah.
He did a lot of social networking too,
He
and
did.
videos, and lots of youth helping on his campaign. He was doing a lot.
I'll tell you, this Davenport riding is a very strong concentration of Portuguese Canadians, and Christina Martins is Portuguese Canadian. Jonah Shine is not. And the Grits thought that they'd caught a break when the NDP didn't nominate somebody who was from the Portuguese community. They thought they had a chance to keep this seat red, as it has been for 30 years. But still, we've got 50 polls or so still to hear from, and Jonah Shine has a 500-vote lead over Christina Martins. That one's way too close to call. Other Liberal NDP fights up in Thunder Bay, Atikokan. Still a 500-vote lead for Bill Morrow. He won this by 50 last time, so he's not sweating too much anymore. There's six
Only
polls
6
to hear
polls
from.
left. That's
You better
not-
put a check mark beside that one, guys.
There.
6 polls to hear from. That one's done. Bill Morrow's going back to Queen's Park. They're going to be, what's the name of that restaurant everybody
Hoyto
goes?
House.
The Hoyto House in Thunder Bay. They'll be singing huzzas for Bill Morrow up there. They got a new hospital up there. Morrow was instrumental, I think, in getting that hospital built. They call it the Taj Mahal Hospital.
That he fought against the flow, too. There was
There's
a sense
some.
after the Premier didn't go back up for that northern debate that they'd written off some
Right.
of those northern seats.
Nickel Belt, Franche-Gélinas, rookie MPP for the New Democrats. Big win over Tony Rima. Tony might not have been helped, actually, by appearing on the agenda when we did our program in Sudbury and musing that the Liberals were looking at a carbon tax. That might not have helped his campaign there, but anyway, Franche-Gélinas going back to Queen's Park. 54 Liberal seats, 37 Progressive Conservatives, 16 New Democrats. Guys, let me ask you this. I want to know from the people who've had their name on a ballot. An hour and a half after the polls close, and it's a typical election night. Monique, when it's this razor thin, as it was, for example, 26 years ago, what's going through your head if you're at Central HQ?
26 years ago. Wow. 85,
Yep.
I was a U of T student, and I was helping out in the Central campaign, and I was on the bus from Toronto to London. We were going to the big arena to celebrate with David Peterson, and it was pandemonium. Every time they declared another seat elected, everybody up in the bus yelling, cheering. I'm sure anyone on the 401 wondered what this crazy bus was all about. There were a few buses going, but it was a fun night. But it was nail biting. But again, we'd been in the wilderness for so long that that was a huge event.
Howard, an hour and a half after the polls close, what's going on at Central HQ for the NDP?
Well, I think given how close some of these things are tonight, you're going to have people looking at the possibility of recounts. You're going to be. I don't think this is necessarily going to be over tonight.
Norm?
Well, I know that, I was mentioning before about these write-in ballots and all that. I mean, these are all going to be hotly contested, whether or not the person's name was correct or was incorrect in the very close ridings. And
Let's look at some more of those close ridings.
you know what I'd like to see too sometime?
What's
I don't
that?
know whether you have it or not, Steve. Do you have the percentage vote?
Let's
Yes.
get the total vote, guys. Let's see how we're doing on that. We haven't seen that yet tonight. Good point.
How much each party has?
We could
so
do total vote also
Yeah.
across the province and also by region. That'd be good to get. But we've got Liberal, Progressive, Conservative one-on-one fights that we want to show you as well tonight. Starting in Brant riding.
Levac, we haven't heard of him all
Dave
night.
Levac
There
is
he
only leading by 1,000. This was a close one. We've still got lots of polls to hear from, 65 polls to hear from. That seat's been Liberal since 1933.
I was talking
It's
to
a
Bob
close seat.
Nixon this afternoon, and he was predicting that we'd do okay, and he said, "Say hi, Steve."
Bob Nixon held it for many years, as did his father. In Halton, look how tight this one is.
Yeah.
1,500 vote difference between Ted Chudley, whose grandfather was premier, T.L. Kennedy, back in the late 40s.
And still 100 and some polls to go.
Yep, lots of polls
We could
still to hear
pull
from.
that out.
Chudley only won that by 1,000 votes last time. Kitchener Centre, look how tight this one is, 400 and almost 20 votes, 420 votes that Cabinet Minister John Malloy leads Dave McDonald by. A very tight one, and still 30 polls to hear from in Kitchener Centre. How about some other Liberal PC one-on-one battles? In Niagara Falls, look how tight this one is, 600 votes between Kim Crater, who runs an interesting campaign. Doesn't say he's a Liberal, doesn't put Dalton McGinty on his literature. He's the local candidate.
And
Kim
he has a really weird collection of ties, too.
He's running against George Lepp for the Progressive Conservatives. We actually did a program in Niagara. Both these guys were on, so whichever one wins, the agenda effect, as we will now call it,
Exactly.
survives. Let's look at Oshawa. Jerry Willett, very close. Almost all the polls reporting, though, but it's a close win. Jerry Willett will go back to Queen's Park. 1995, he was first elected on the heels of that common sense revolution.
That's another one that New Democrats probably thought they were going to take, and if they're at 16 installed and they only take 6 additional seats tonight, that's going to be hugely disappointing, because coming out of the debate with that little Andrea wave and a little bit of orange fever happening again, they had to be looking at a night that was a lot more productive
But
than that.
Oshawa is always a grudge match like that.
Yeah. Here's Ottawa West Nepean, the former mayor of Ottawa, Bob Shirelli, who once was an MPP, left to become a mayor of Ottawa, and then came back to provincial politics. He's got a very slim lead over Randall Denley. We've still got, 30 polls, 32 polls to hear from, so we're not going to call this one yet.
1,300 ahead. He's not
I
doing
think
so
Elizabeth
bad.
it
May might
1300?
have won that for him.
1,300 ahead. You think we can put a check mark beside that
Maybe
one?
not a check mark, half a check mark.
I don't think it works that way, Monique. I don't think you get half a check mark. In St. Catharines, well, we're getting 21 polls to hear
There you
from,
go.
and Jim Bradley's got about a 1,500 vote lead over Sandy Bellows for the Progressive Conservatives. Bradley is, now with Mr. Sterling not in provincial politics anymore, the Dean of the Ontario Legislature, having been there since '77.
What's interesting, though, is how much of a new look legislature it's going to be, with 20 incumbents retiring, and the number of incumbents who've been beat tonight. It's going to be a major changeover down there.
Very different place.
Yep. Let's keep going. I think we've got a few more of these, and then we've got those total vote numbers you guys were asking for. In Thornhill, Peter Sherman wins.
No.
The Conservatives hang on to that seat.
$5 down.
This is one of those seats where we said if the Conservatives have a pretty good province-wide number, the Conservatives will hang on to this seat. Bernie Farber really thought that he could hang on to that seat despite. And here's Perth Wellington. Look how tight this one is. Still
100.
25 polls to hear from, folks. And look how tight that one is. It's exactly 100 votes with 25 polls still to hear from. That one has been just seesawing all night long. Got to keep an eye on that one. Here is the situation across the province. The Liberals are leading and elected in 53. Progressive Conservatives leading and elected in 37. NDP leading and elected in 17. No Green seat tonight. The Elizabeth May effect will not happen in the province of Ontario. In terms of gains and losses, the Liberals are off 17. They could afford to lose 16 and still have their majority. They've lost 17. The PCs are up 12. The NDP are up 7. Let's continue our look across the province and see what the numbers suggest. So far, they seem to be
Other
suggesting a
percentages?
tough night. Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
The total vote, Liberals at 37,
Wow.
PCs at 35, NDP at 23, and the Greens at 3. Now let's just go through this. The Liberal vote in the last election was 43, so they're down 6. The PCs are looking pretty good at 35% tonight, just 2 points behind the governing party. Look at the total number of votes cast. This first past the post system really does some funny things, doesn't it?
Well, the NDP are certainly not winning from their splits, because if they're at 23% with 16, 17 seats, they're not doing as well as they could have if they split
We're
it differently.
being hurt by the splits right now.
Yeah.
The PCs have done a little better than the last few polls had suggested. I think it had them down around 33%, and the NDP maybe up 25, 26. So
Look how efficient that Liberal vote is, though. At 37%, if they get one more seat and they win a majority government with 37% of the total votes,
that's what Bob did in
that's what Bob Ray did in 1990. Yeah. And the Green vote, we do have to say, the Greens got 300,000 votes last time, about 8.3% of the total votes cast. They lost they bled a lot of their votes tonight. I'm going to assume, Victoria, they lost a lot of it to the Liberals because McGinty did run as the Green candidate this time. You think that's legit?
Well, definitely, it is a factor. I mean, there's a lot of other factors. In the last election, we had the one school policy, which was the only one, and it was the big issue of that election was over education. And we had the right platform, no matter what anyone else here believes. Almost like it was endorsed by school boards across the province. It was endorsed by the teachers' federations. You know, we had the right policy for that election. And I think that that is having an effect actually more than people are really thinking right now.
I think the Greens also bled to the NDP because if you're looking for a protest vote, you know, you don't like the other two, who you're going to go with. I think the NDP did have some momentum, the Jack factor, the other, you know, just the orange wave. And I think if people were just looking to park somewhere, not the two traditional parties, then they were going to the orange as opposed to the green this time.
I disagree. I don't think you saw much bleeding from the Greens to the NDP. I think most of the NDP vote is really coming from those people across the province. I said earlier, you know, the 53% who live paycheck to paycheck and are saying, hey, what about me? I think New Democrats have appealed to a lot of those people.
They picked up their share.
But another point, though, is that we took, the Greens actually took a lot of Conservative vote in the last election. And because the Conservatives are up, we've lost a lot of votes.
Yeah.
In my riding, when I was running in the last election, a lot of Conservatives were coming in, card-carrying, you know, forever Conservatives were saying, I can't vote for John Tory and the religious school funding. I'm going to vote for you now.
I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of Green vote in the last election did bleed from the Conservatives. And now that that issue is no longer there, I think Conservative voters are going back to the Conservative Party.
Let's check and show, I think we've got a visual graphic, map, call it what you will, that will reflect how Dalton McGinty went from 2 consecutive strong majority governments to hanging on by his fingernails tonight. He's at 53, he needs 54. This is Central Ontario ridings at dissolution. There were 8 ridings. You see the color coding, how they broke down, and that's what's happened tonight. They've almost all gone blue. What's that one on the eastern end there that has basically hung on with the Liberals? Got to figure out what that one is. But basically, that very graphically shows you tonight how Central Ontario was evenly divided between Liberals and Conservatives 4 years ago. Tonight, it's almost all blue. Rural Ontario has returned to the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. We've got 53 Liberals elected and leading at this point in the night. You need 54 to win, and like I've said, this one's going to be a cliffhanger all night long, friends. We're not going to call this one for a long time because we got so many seats right now where the difference is literally 100, 200, 300 votes.
And on your graphic that you showed a couple ago, you were showing 19 still in play, and I think that's the big factor right now, right? When you look at the ones that you've actually declared as elected, we're at 44, so we're, you know, within striking distance. But you look at there's still 19 that are in play, and that's so it's bouncing back and forth every 2 minutes here and keeping us on edge.
Could I ask, could we look at some of the northern seats we haven't looked at?
Which ones?
Well, I'd be interested in
River?
Sudbury again.
Let's
I'd be
see how
interested in
Bartolucci's
Thunder
doing.
Bay, Superior North, and I'd be interested in Kenora Rainy River.
Kenora Rainy, Howard wants to see his old seat doing, and we should also check on his old pal Gilles Bisson in Timmins, James Bay, and see what's happening there. I don't think
I
we've
have no
we've seen
concerns
that.
there. I have no concerns
He's
there.
going to win. We want to find out
But we
how
got
much he's going to win by.
Great candidate up there this time. So
You know,
I'm
Howard,
sure
you're getting a bunch of compliments on Twitter right now, just so you know.
What are they saying?
They're all saying Howard's a really nice guy, and you know, it sounds like they're really going to miss you.
Geez, after all those years of politics, people say that about me?
I never said that when you were
What are they drinking today?
You know what's interesting is how strong the Tory vote's been in the face. None of these things happen in a vacuum. And when you think of the things that are going on, the Rob Ford follies in Toronto, the economic jitters, the fact that there's a new Conservative majority in Ottawa, you would have thought all those things would have played against them, but they've been stronger here.
Ask and ye shall receive, Howard Hampton.
I'm really pleased with the 35%.
Let's see what happens up in the northern ridings. At the moment, the Liberals are elected now in 3, New Democrats in 2. This is in the northwest part of the province. That's what Howard Hampton used to represent. And let's break this down and see how they work riding by riding by riding. Northwestern Ontario. Mike Brown officially goes down now in Algoma, Manitoulin. His career at Queen's Park is over. First elected in 1987. Former Speaker of the Ontario Legislature. Algoma, Manitoulin goes for the NDP. In Kenora Rainy River, there's Sarah Campbell. She holds the seat for you, Mr. Hampton. Holds the seat for you. That one stays in the NDP column with still 20 polls to hear from, but it's a big enough lead to call.
I still want to see those last 20 polls.
In Sault Ste. Marie, David Orazietti with a 2-1 lead over his New Democratic Party challenger, Jim Turner, who thought he had a shot at that seat in the Sioux because it did go blue federally, well off the pace there.
Pretty sure someone owes me $5 on that one.
Thunder Bay, Atikokan. There's Bill Morrow. That one's awful close. Look at that. 4 polls still to hear from. It turned out to about a 400 and some odd vote difference, which Bill will take. He only won by 50 last time. And let's check.
It's a landslide.
It's a landslide
Gilbert did
Morrow.
not do as well as you guys had expected on
And
that
Michael
at all.
Gravel.
Michael's bounced back.
Michael
in.
Gravel is back in again
Yes.
as the Northern Development Minister in
And
Superior North.
this one is interesting because I think if you look, the Conservative vote has come up a lot from what it was in the last election. And if that vote had gone to Steve Mantis, which we were counting on, New Democrats would have another seat. But the protest or the opposition to the government actually went to the Conservatives in that riding.
Here's what's happening in northeastern Ontario. Minik Smith, this was your part of the province that you represented for 8 years. Elected in 3 other New Democrats, leading in 1, still too close to call for the Liberals. Elected in 1 for the Progressive Conservatives, that's in North Bay. Nipissing riding, there's Franchella now with a 2-1 win over Tony Rima. That's a big win for her. Vic Fideli, there's Mike Harris's old seat, Minik Smith's old seat in Nipissing riding. A big win for Vic Fideli over his Liberal challenger. Rick Bartolucci now takes a 103-vote lead with still almost 20 polls to hear from over his New Democratic Party challenger. Guys, you got to remember, this guy won this riding by 10,000 votes last time, and he's barely squeaking through this time. It's call it what you will, a bit of an indictment on either him, on the Liberals, on whatever. Temiskaming Cochrane. This was a seat the Liberals held by 300 votes last time. They get crushed this time. New Democrats in ascension in Temiskaming Cochrane. In Timmins James Bay, Al Spacek did a pretty good job there. The mayor of, I want to say, Kapuskasing? Yeah, mayor of Kapuskasing, who ran for the Conservatives. And as I have to tell all the showbiz people, that's Al Spacek, not Sissy Spacek, who is running for the Conservatives there. But Timmins James Bay staying New Democrat tonight.
The interesting note on the northern stuff is that, you know, earlier this week, the pundits were all saying that it was going to go all orange with a bit of blue and there'd be no Liberals left. And now we've got Orazietti, we've got Bartolucci in play, we've got Morrow and Gravel back. So, you know, I think we're holding our own and, you know, it won't be as big a crowd at Northern Caucus.
Want to see the tight races?
But they'll still have fun.
I'd like to see Eastern Ontario. I haven't seen
Okay, let's do the tight races.
the Ottawa ridings.
We'll do the tight races. That's right. We need to see Ottawa. Let's do the tight races, and then we probably haven't seen Ottawa because they're all slam dunks. But let's go take a look.
Well,
York
I'm not saying how much they
Southwestern.
won by.
Where are we here? 500 votes. 500 votes. Albanese's up, and we still need to hear from 18 polls. So it's not done yet. 18, 16. 16 polls still to hear from. Not done yet. Let's keep going. More tight races. In Perth, Wellington. Look at that one. Still too tight.
Wow.
Still way too tight. And 22 polls still to hear from. Can't call that one yet. Other tight races across the province of Ontario tonight. In Davenport, 500-vote lead still for the New Democrats. Let's do Eastern Ontario after this one, guys. In Trinity Spadina, Marchese's now up. Trinity Spadina with still lots of polls to come. 70 polls still to hear from. And Marchese now, for the first time this evening, takes a lead of 400 votes over Sarah Thompson.
And it will depend on where those polls come from.
Absolutely right. In Kitchener Centre, once again, John Malloy holding on to about a 460-vote lead over his Conservative challenger, Dave McDonald, and still almost 20 polls to almost 30.
More than he's at all night, though.
20
I mean,
polls to
it's
hear from
broadening.
still. You want to call that one yet, Minik?
No, not yet.
Not yet,
No,
exactly.
no.
No
Still
half
with
check
you.
marks here. Other tight races in the province of Ontario tonight. Is that it? Okay, so let's go out to Eastern Ontario. We need to hear Ottawa area ridings and other Eastern Ontario ridings. I think we can assume a lot of folks in Eastern Ontario that we knew of, for example, John Yakubuski, these guys, are back in, but we want to find out what the margin of victory is because it does tell a bit of a story over the course of the evening. Tim Hudak, I'm advised, the Conservative Party leader, will speak in 10 minutes' time. So we will bring you that, of course. We'll bring you all the speeches tonight. Tim Hudak speaking in 10 minutes' time. The interesting thing was last time, 4 years ago, traditionally, third place speaks first, second place speaks second, the winner speaks last. Last time, because John Tory's riding was up in the air for such a long time, Dalton McGinty decided he didn't want to wait and he wanted to hit the 11 o'clock news, so he spoke first. And the Premier gave his victory speech at the Chateau Laurier. He's given 2 of those. He'll be giving a third one tonight. Whether he is the presider of a majority government, that's another question. Eastern Ontario, Norm Sterling, you wanted to know the 15 ridings. The Conservatives are leading or elected in 8, Liberals in 7. Still a shutout in Eastern Ontario for the New Democrats and the Greens. Let's see how that works out in the 15 ridings. In Carleton, Mississippi Mills, Big victory this time for Jack McLaren. Maybe not as big margins as you used to win by, but still pretty good margin for Jack McLaren. In Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington, Randy Hillier won this seat by 1,000 votes last time. He's going to win it by a lot more this time. Randy Hillier going back to Queen's Park. In Ottawa Centre, Yasser Naqvi with a very big win. He won this one by only a couple of thousand last time. He was the Liberal Party president, has a very high profile for a rookie member. He's going back to Queen's Park. Prince Edward Hastings, a loss for the Liberals. Education Minister Leona Dombrowski goes down. Todd Smith will be the new MPP for Prince Edward Hastings. Also in the East, the seat gains, 3 for the Conservatives, all at the expense of the Liberal Party of Ontario. And you know, it's interesting. We've been watching that Liberal number bounce up and down all night long. 53, 52, 54. It's stuck on 53 right now. I know for all intents and purposes, that's a majority, because the Speaker will come from the opposition and Mr. McGinty will have the votes to win everything he needs. But Howard Hampton, you made a great point. That's one by-election away from trouble.
Yeah. It's one by-election away from trouble, and let me just say this, all right? If I'm an opposition leader and I see the economic storm that Ontario is going to continue to go through, I'm not sure that I'm going to be unhappy with the results tonight.
Let's show what the NDP is doing across the province of Ontario tonight,
Can I
Howard.
see some of the other Eastern Ontario ridings?
What else you want to hear from?
Well, we haven't seen Leeds, Granville. We haven't seen Renfrew.
They're all blue,
Nipissing.
you know that.
Yeah, I
you
just
want to know
want
how
to see.
much.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll get that for you. We'll get that for you.
I do.
These are NDP.
To know how his leadership candidate Lisa McLeod's doing.
We're
That's
going
what
to
he
do,
wants to know.
get Lisa McLeod too.
Lisa's
These are all
a great
NDP
friend.
gains. Look at this one. There's Essex. That's another NDP gain. We're going to do NDP gains and Progressive Conservative gains. Stand by. Okay, we know Hamilton Mountain's an NDP gain.
There's the Andrea Horvath effect.
That's a riding that went by 1,300 votes to the Liberals last time, goes by 5,000 votes to the NDP this time.
A lot of Liberal women went down tonight.
Yeah. Let's go to PC headquarters at the Niagara Convention Center, and there's Tim Hudak with his wife, Deb Hutton. Howard, you wanted to say?
Can you show the total results in Kenora Rainy River, not just who was first and who was second, but the total results? Like,
Can't do it right this second,
okay,
because we're going to
all
keep
right.
the camera on Tim Hudak. Tim Hudak has been in politics since 1995. He got elected when he was 26 years old. He's one of the original members of Mike Harris's Common Sense Revolution. He knows everybody in that room. And unlike all the other candidates, he had his family, he had their picture plastered on his bus, he had them out at every campaign event, and he has not got what you would call a typical political spouse. For those who don't know, his wife, Debbie Hutton, was a senior advisor in Mike Harris's premier's office. So this is a woman who not only gives advice as a wife, but also can give expert political advice as someone who's been close to power. Tim is now giving his greetings to everybody in the room. He didn't win tonight. He wanted to become the first rookie leader since Bill Davis 40 years ago to win a majority government. That didn't happen. He wanted to be the first rookie leader since Frank Miller in 1985 to win the most seats in an election. That didn't happen either. But he does improve the Progressive Conservative performance by 12 seats over 2007. And to that end, he can claim, I would suspect, Jim, a modicum of success, and certainly hangs on to his job. There's no question about that.
Oh, quite so. When he won the leadership, it was probably a 2-election proposition in any case, and that would be the expectation. Had he come in and sort of only gained 3 or 4 or 5 seats from what John Tory had without that incendiary issue, there would have been some real question, because by the time he runs again the next election, assuming it's a majority and it's 4 years out, he'll have been in politics for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and he'll have to be deciding whether that's what he wants to do for the rest of his life. People will decide, would have been asking, is it a liability to have a guy who's never been anything but a politician? But he can claim this is the first big step, and then we'll see what happens next time.
He's increased the popular vote by about 3 points, or a little bit more than 3 points.
Yeah, last we saw the Tory vote across the province at 35%,
Yeah.
which is up, I guess, 3 from the last time.
Yeah.
if I were Tim Hudak tonight, I would not be disappointed
No.
in the result.
No.
Well,
This is-
they're whooping it up there in Niagara, on the, Niagara Falls. So he looks pretty happy. A lot of high fives going on right now.
And you know what? I mean, this is probably not going to be a government that's going to last 4 years.
And you say that
I
because?
Well, because it's so razor sharp, and all you have to have is someone quit, or or something happen to somebody who becomes too ill to be there.
It's interesting, Minik, the call from Premier McGinty was the same one Stephen Harper made. I want a strong, stable, provincial, majority, Liberal, in this case, government. Doesn't look like he's there. Just missed it by that much, as they say.
I'm not sure because, I mean, we haven't seen our leading and elected, but we had so many that were too close to call. I mean, there's still margin for 2 or 3 to move over our way, and you know, we don't necessarily know that the 53-37 that have been bouncing back have been the same 2 every time. So
You know
I'm
what,
holding
friends?
out hope. Eternally optimistic.
Let's bring the sound up at PC headquarters at the Niagara Convention Centre and hear Tim Hudak address the troops. His first election as leader of the Ontario Conservatives, 43 years old. He's improved Tory fortunes across the province tonight. Tim Hudak.
My friends, let me tell you, it's great to be home in Niagara again.
You guys hearing this okay? Oh, wait, full.
And I want to give a special thank you to the good people of Niagara, West Glanbrook, for electing me once again. Having crisscrossed this great province the last several weeks, I witnessed the beauty of Ontario, the strength of our people, but like all of you, it is great for Debbie and I to be back home. You know, friends, it's been a long campaign, a hard-fought campaign. And although the result is not the one that we'd hoped for, we do accept it. A few minutes ago, I spoke with Dalton McGinty, and I congratulated him and his team on their victory in today's election. We don't yet know whether this will be a minority or a majority government, but it is very clear that the people of Ontario have sent a strong message that they want a change in direction. And friends, it is very clear that the people of Ontario have put Dalton McGinty on a much shorter leash. I also called and spoke with Andrea Horvath, and I congratulated Andrea on a campaign that was respectful, thoughtful, and passionate. I may not agree with all of Andrea's policies, but still I've come to respect her as an opponent and have never doubted her commitment, and I congratulate her on a very hard-fought campaign. And today, voters sent a message to each leader. They told us in no uncertain terms they want to know we are listening. They expect us to focus like a laser on creating good, sustainable, private sector jobs. They expect us to rein in runaway government spending, to make smarter choices with their tax dollars, and to ensure that government lives within its means. And friends, as we fought for, Ontario families need and deserve relief for the family budget that has been squeezed these last 8 years beyond what they can afford. We will fight each and every day to protect the family budget. And time will tell if Dalton McGinty actually got the message. But I want Ontario families to know that I heard you loud and clear. My PC colleagues and I will be there for you, making sure your message is also heard loud and clear in the legislature. We will work hard every day to help create private sector jobs, to balance the books, and to protect families from any more Dalton McGinty tax hikes. And we won't be shy. We will tell the truth about government finances, and we will hold Dalton McGinty to account each and every day. So, my friends, although we did not get the result we wanted tonight, I am damn proud of the campaign that we ran across the province of Ontario. And I am proud of it because it was a campaign that defined a positive, clear alternative for Ontario families. And friends, as a result, we can point to progress tonight. We were very close to a tie in the popular vote right across the province of Ontario. And not only was it close to a tie in the popular vote, I'm proud to say we have over a dozen new Conservative MPPs who will welcome the legislature, be a vibrant addition to our caucus. Our party is strong. And as a result, friends, of all the work you've done, the new dozen-plus MPPs, practically a tie in the overall vote across our province, our PC party is stronger than it has been in over a decade. Lots to celebrate tonight for Conservatives across the province of Ontario. And let me say this as leader of the Ontario PC party. I want to thank all of our candidates, our caucus members, our donors, and the thousands and thousands of campaign workers in every corner of our province. You guys were one fantastic team, and to be very proud of our results tonight right across our province, electing new MPPs. So I know we may be disappointed in the overall outcome when it comes to the recount. But we are not, and we will never be disappointed in who and what we are and what we stand for, the proud PC Party of Ontario. So tonight the voters told us that we have more work to do, and we will start first thing tomorrow morning. And when the legislature returns, I am ready, and our stronger team is ready to roll up our sleeves, to get down to work, and to defend the interests of Ontario families each and every day. We will be constructive, we'll be positive, and we will present an alternate vision of Ontario's future, a future where government actually lives within its means, where it sets priorities, where it spends wisely, and puts the interests of Ontario families and private sector job creation at the top of the list. And we will work with parties and with members of the legislature who support that vision. And we will strongly and respectfully oppose those who do not. My friends, Debbie, Miller, and I, thank you so much. Debbie Miller and I, thank you so much. Little Millie, she's in bed now. It's got a little late. But Debbie Miller and I want to thank you so much for your hard work, your support, all your kind words, because, friends, together we have never, ever stopped believing in our great province. It's hardworking, innovative, and compassionate people. That's who we'll fight for every day. Because as Conservatives, we have never stopped believing in the incredible people of the province of Ontario. This beautiful province, its industrious, hardworking women and men, its leaders, the entrepreneurs that have that can-do attitude. And friends, together we will build a better future for Ontario families, because we've never, ever stopped believing in the great people of our province. And friends, we never will. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for all the wins here tonight.
Oh, well.
But it's in the wind.
That's Tim Hudak, leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, in a buoyant Niagara Convention Centre in Niagara Falls. Mr. Hudak has taken the Conservatives to a better place today. They got 3% more of the total vote. They picked up 12 seats. They didn't win the election. He's not going to be the premier as a result of tonight's returns. But the Progressive Conservative Party, as he says, put Dalton McGinty on a much shorter leash. How do you think the premier feels about hearing that about him?
Well, you know, he can say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we are still going to form the government. And I think it was a gracious speech. You know, he has improved the margin, and he's brought in some new members, so he's got to be proud about that tonight. But I think what he faces tomorrow in his new caucus is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that. I mean, I think it's a great victory for Tim. I mean, first time out. There are very few leaders who win first time out. You know, he went through a tough campaign. He did it with a lot of energy and vim and vigor, and you know, he came out. I mean, he's only 2 points in popular vote behind Dalton McGinty. That's a pretty good show, given our economic times at the present times. I mean, I think Dalton McGinty got lucky with the world situation. People frightened about what's happening, and so they were very reluctant to change their vote.
Can I tell you something? That's a very gracious thing for you to say about Tim Hudak, given that he did not intervene at all to help you hang on to your nomination when you got kind of jumped from the side.
Well, you know, things in politics don't always come by the book or happen in the most gracious way. But notwithstanding that, you know, all of my colleagues, my friends, are going to go back there and they're going to fight for a new Ontario. My focus is to try to get Ontario back on track, get some fiscal, financial responsibility back into Ontario, and unfortunately the other two parties haven't offered that. And
Now be careful,
you know,
Norm. Be careful.
I'll be careful.
It's actually
Quit while you're ahead.
Exactly.
it's a good point worth making, though, the point Norm Sterling makes. The seat count suggests a wider chasm between the Conservatives and the Liberals tonight. The fact is, Dalton McGinty
2%.
bested Tim Hudak by 2 points.
2%.
That's right.
If I were Tim Hudak tonight, I would not be disappointed in the result. And I'll tell you why. The economy is taking a tumble. I think the deficit numbers, when they come out in the spring, are going to be much higher than people were told. The deficit numbers, the deficit projections were based upon really ratcheting down healthcare spending. The former Conservative government tried very hard to ratchet down healthcare
There's your
spending.
Mike Prue number, incidentally.
Yeah.
Michael Prue winning
Yep.
Beaches East York.
I knew that would be the case.
That one's still too close to call.
So if I'm Tim Hudak tonight, you've improved your fortunes, you've finished a very close second in a lot of ridings, and you know there's some very bad economic news, and I suggest some very bad energy news to come. You don't have natural gas plants that are half built and then shut them down without paying multi-millions of dollars of damages.
As happened in Mississauga.
And Mississauga and Oakville.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can only hide those figures for so long, and when they come out, I think the public's going to be very, very angry.
That Burlington race, still too close to call. There's a couple of races here still close to call. Jim, I mean, it is worth repeating. This is a rookie leader who people will say blew a 12-point lead. The fact is, I'm not sure that lead was there to begin with. The reality is, he's 2 points behind a two-term premier. That's not bad for your first time out the gate.
It's a heck of a better result than Mr. McGinty got in 1999 in his first go, that's for sure. He told his supporters there was a lot to celebrate, and from their point of view, there is. There's no question that the Premier's on a shorter leash. You know, there's the political numbers, and there's also kind of the moral authority. And when you come back with 37% and are this chastened, and
There's the Rocco Rossi one, incidentally. Mike Cole defeating Rocco Rossi handily tonight in Eglinton Lawrence.
His capacity to deal with some of the challenges with certainty is probably going to be diminished, and he's probably at some point going to have to wonder, well, what comes next, you know, whether Liberals might begin to wonder whether he's overstayed his welcome. And, you know, those rumblings will begin within the next couple of years, if not sooner.
Monique Smith, you know Dalton McGinty well. When he was opposition leader, you were his chief of staff. He didn't win his third consecutive majority tonight. And as everybody has been saying around the table so far, these numbers are not strong enough to last for 4 years. At the moment, they're not strong enough. Even if it's 54, it's not strong enough to last for 4 years. How quickly do, I don't want to say the knives come out, but how quickly do other people start to organize potential leadership campaigns?
I don't think the knives are going to come out. I think that people are incredibly proud of Dalton and the leadership that he's shown. And, you know, a three-peat everyone knew was going to be a challenge, and we did pull it off. And, you know, no one can take that away from him. I think, you know, there was talk of leadership prior to the election. I mean, there's always talk of leadership. There's talk of leadership for, you know, to replace Tim starting 2 days ago when it wasn't looking quite so good. So, you know, it is a blood sport, as Norm knows only too well. By the way, I think it was very unclassy what your leader did to you, and I'll just put that on the record now.
I should tell you, the last time I spoke to the leader, Tim Hudak, he said that's the toughest decision he's had to make as leader of the PC party, not intervening to help Norm Sterling. He said, if you're going to stand for local democracy, you got to mean it. And as much as he says it pained him not to intervene, now you can tell us if that's true, he said it was the first tough call he made not to intervene to help you. I'm just putting it out there. That's what he said. Folks, we're cycling through all the ridings here. I do want to say at this point as well, we have heard that turnout across the province of Ontario tonight was an abysmal 41.6%. Did I hear that right, Stacey? Did you just tell me it was 41.6% turnout? That's pretty low. I mean, it was barely 50 last time.
52.
52 last time.
Gone down.
That suggests a remarkable lack of interest in what was going on.
Democracy on life support.
I think you have to keep something in mind. People have gone through municipal elections.
Yes, that's true.
Threats upon threats upon threats of federal elections. You're seeing a never-ending story of politics south of the border of the United States, and now a provincial election. I think people are saying, please,
enough.
Please, could I just watch the hockey game?
Well, I think they're saying enough, but I also think you've got to look at it from the flip side of the volunteers.
Let me just interrupt for a second, because Bob Delaney told me that when I see his results come up tonight, I have to mention that he held Mississauga-Streetsville and that he's an excellent goalie. Right, Howie?
He is a good goalie.
He's a very good goalie.
He is.
And coming from Howard Hampton, who is the best hockey player I know, that's high praise.
Jeez,
Is that
thank
your
you.
segue
Thank
into
you.
the Leafs victory tonight,
No,
too?
we're not talking about that.
No, we were talking about voter turnout, and I think it is appalling that it's so low. I'm not surprised, given what I was hearing at the doors during the campaign. But I do think there is also volunteer fatigue. So the pulling of the vote might not have been as effective as it could have been, given that there are fewer people who are able or who are willing to go to the doors one more time, which would have been, in some cases, 4 times in the last 5 years, which is exhausting. 6 years.
Well, I said at the outset of the program that I think a lot of people didn't want to choose any one of the 3 options. They were not. In my view,
Norm, if you're Andrea Horvath, you've almost doubled the seat total for the NDP, and
I
taken it.
I understand that,
yeah.
but we're 41% and we were 52%. So there's 10% of the people who voted the last time sat at home. Or more than that, 20% of the people who voted last time.
Your engineer friend Phil McNeely's back in.
Phil's back in.
There's still 2 engineers in the Ontario legislature.
Those totals are utterly alarming.
Yes.
Norm was talking in the green room earlier about one of the benefits of minority government being that it might present a better opportunity for institutional change.
Sherry DeNovo hangs on
Yes.
Parkdale High Park for the NDP. Yeah. Close race, though.
And plainly, some change is needed because people have lost faith in the process and what goes on down there.
Look at that, still too close. 332 votes, Perth Wellington, still too close to call. And Peterborough, once again, votes with the winners. These guys, every election.
Look at this. Look at the Conservative total and the NDP total.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that Mr. Leal got lucky.
Because his
got very
opponent
lucky.
split the vote.
And they both had a lot of vote.
Yeah.
Both the New
that's one of
Democrats.
the-
and the
Yakubowski
just slipped by.
He slipped by 20,000 votes.
They always vote like
One of the
that.
things they've been talking a lot online and throughout this whole night is about that we don't have proportional representation. So the 37-35 split is not actually fitting in. Like, a lot of people feel that their vote's wasted. It doesn't matter what party they're voting for, but when it comes out this way with the numbers, people do get disillusioned. They don't feel like it means anything. We don't have a per vote subsidy in Ontario. There's no real meaning for those people casting that vote in those
Sue Wong
circumstances.
holding Jerry Phillips' old seat for the Liberals, incidentally.
Margaret Best won pretty handily there.
Yeah, that is a good point, Victoria. There's no, people remember this federally. You know, some people say, why would I vote for someone who's not going to win? Well, because they got a vote subsidy. You know, you could at least support the Green Party with a vote because you get money for it. We don't have that in Ontario, so that wouldn't have been the case.
But even my Green candidate was saying, I'm not going to win, but I want the other two, whichever one of the other two do
Bradley's
win.
still too close to call. Look at that one,
right.
1,500.
He's not going to be happy. Whichever one of the other two to remember my position on nuclear. That doesn't really instill a lot of incentive to people to get out to vote either. If the candidate that you actually want to support says, I'm not going to win.
Bartolucci wins in Sudbury.
There we
Just
go.
squeaked by, less than 1,000.
When you're getting a really low vote and you know that that's going to happen, what are you supposed to say? Is you supposed to lie and say, yeah, I can win this? I mean, there's a certain building point in a small party that happens. And it's hard because the kind of system we have doesn't encourage people to vote for the smaller players. It becomes the lesser of two evils. Which of the two do you think are going to be there, and which is the least worst one for me to vote for? And so our system just it doesn't make a lot of sense for making people care about what they're voting for.
Folks, I'm going to interrupt you for a second here. There's Peter Tabbins, incidentally, going to a big victory on Toronto Danforth. Marisa Sterling, first-time candidate, did a good job. And Rosario Marchese still hanging on barely in Trinity Spadina.
900 votes.
So that's enough, you think?
Depends where they are.
Depends where they are.
There's the Welland seat. The NDP held Welland, Peter Cormos' seat.
Okay.
Andrea Horvath is arriving at campaign headquarters for the NDP. Everybody looks pretty happy there. Christine Elliott holds on to the Whitby-Oshawa seat for the Conservatives tonight. She, of course, the wife of Federal Finance Minister Jim Flaherty. The NDP vote did improve tonight. There's Teresa Peruzza, incidentally, hanging on to Sandra Pupatello's Windsor West seat for the Liberals. Dwight Duncan, that's pretty tight, eh? Only a 3,000 vote win over the NDP in Tecumseh. And Monty Quinter, 80 years old, octogenarian, keeps the seat in York Centre. Albanese, still too close to call. 700 votes.
She's pulling out.
Yeah, she's pulling ahead. 700 votes, that looks pretty solid for the Liberals, but we're not going to call it yet. Julia Munro, there's no surprise there. That's a safe seat for the Conservatives in York Simcoe. And Ajax
Dixon.
Pickering, Joe Dixon back again.
That's great.
4,500 vote victory. Mike Brown going down.
Back to the beginning.
You talk about the Horvath effect. And Andrea Horvath's numbers went from, Howard, I'm trying to remember what your total vote was back in 2003. You had a rough election in 2003. Something like 18% or something like that?
It was about 18.
18,
Yeah.
and she's got it up to, last I saw, about 23, 24. So that has managed to capture 7 more seats for the New Democratic Party of Ontario tonight.
Yeah, and I think probably New Democrats have been hurt by the splits the most.
Which is unusual. You know, what surprised me was I got some literature at my house today that had, it was conservative literature and it was attacking the NDP.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that. Why would the Conservatives attack the NDP?
Oh, for example, Peterborough, all right?
Yeah, but I don't live in Peterborough.
No, but in so many of these ridings, the NDP did really quite well. In a lot of ridings, we didn't win. And a lot of ridings we placed third in, we did extremely well.
That is Mike Layton, incidentally, the son of Jack Layton, who Andrea Horvath just hugged. She is now up at the podium. This is her first campaign as leader of the Ontario NDP. It's a pretty strong showing for a rookie leader, first time out the gate. Let's hear from Andrea Horvath.
Well, friends, today thousands of you voted for change. You voted to send more New Democrats to fight for you at Queen's Park. And you know what? Instead of voting out of fear, you voted for hope. And instead of voting for the same old solutions, you voted for change. By voting for New Democrats, you made a choice, a positive choice, that won't take you for granted, but that will fight for your respect each and every day. You know, we have a lot of work to do. Tonight, the people of Ontario gave 107 people from different parties a very important job. And they sent some important instructions to go along with that job too. And they go like this: we expect you to confront the challenges that we're facing. Nous attendons à ce que vous travailliez ensemble. Je suis prête à le faire. And we expect you to work together, and I am ready to do that. And I know Mr. McGinty and Mr. Hudak are as well. We have all worked very hard, as our families well know, and we have an important job to do. All of us have an important job to do. You know, on the very first day of this campaign, I made it very clear. I'm a fighter. And yes, they are even calling me the Steel Town Scrapper. And as I said at the beginning of the campaign, I didn't want to spend that 4 weeks squabbling with the other leaders. But I do want to spend the next 4 years tackling the challenges that we face. Right? Our team of New Democrats will work with all MPPs to make Ontario's government work. And we've been pretty clear about our priorities. And thousands of Ontarians told us today that they are counting on us to act on those priorities. To make life more affordable. To deliver health care that puts patients first. To create jobs here in Ontario. And that is exactly what we will do. You know, you worked hard to do your part, and as your elected representatives, we won't forget who hired us. We won't forget the job that we have to do. We will work hard for you. You know, our NDP caucus every day will put people at the top of the agenda. We will bring change. We will put people first. And we won't let you down. Now I want to take just a minute to pay tribute to everyone who ran as a candidate in this election, as a New Democrat or for another party. You know, running as a candidate takes a lot of personal sacrifice. And while we may have different ideas and different ways of doing things, I respect anyone who offers themselves for public service, engages people, and tries to make a difference. I want to thank my family. They're here with me today. I want to thank my entire family, but especially my son, Julian, for supporting me. For supporting me and sharing me with the whole province. And I want to thank the voters of Hamilton Centre. I want to thank all of the voters of Hamilton Centre who have chosen to put their confidence in me. It is an honor to work for you and to be your voice at Queen's Park. And so a special thanks, of course, to my Hamilton team for steering the ship while I was crisscrossing the province for the past 4 weeks. You did a fantastic job. You did a fantastic job. And of course, our NDP campaign team overall, I am beyond grateful for your hard work, for your counsel, and for your belief in me. You know, we would not be here without thousands of volunteers who worked so hard for our NDP candidates in my riding and in ridings across the province. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that all of you volunteers have very busy lives, and you have families that you have to take care of, and you have jobs to do. But we came together because we believe in change. You know, working together, we made a real difference tonight, and there is so much more to do. New Democrats have the strongest mandate that we have had in more than 20 years. And I think part of that victory is the result of our positive campaign and our message of change and hope. Right? We promised to work to build a better Ontario, and we will keep that promise. You know, politics isn't about building something for ourselves. It's about building something that we can all share. And it's not just about taking care of ourselves. It's about taking care of each other. Right? It's about working together. It's about working together to create a better, healthier, greener future for our children. Ensemble, nous pouvons faire de l'Ontario une province qui place les gens en premier. Together, we can make Ontario a province where people come first. And tonight, friends, tonight, we are just getting started. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, that last line that Andrea Horvath said, "We are just getting started," I don't think I'm reading too much into that. That was somewhat evocative of Jack Layton's, "And we're not going to stop until the job is done." A strong punchline to finish off a very punchy speech. She did a little bit of French in that speech, which, you know, is tough for her. She doesn't speak French, but she has been trying her French out on the hustings, doing pretty well at it. We're cycling through all the ridings to show you what's happened in the province of Ontario tonight. It is amazing as well, since I know we've got a bunch of history nerds around the table here like me. The numbers in the total vote are very similar to the 1985 election. The Liberals came in that election with 38% of the total vote. Tonight they're 37. The Conservatives in that election were at 37. Tonight they're 35. The NDP was at 25. Tonight they're 24. And yet quite a dramatically different seat count. You remember in that election, the Conservatives won 4 more seats than the Liberals, 52 to 48. The NDP was at 25. Tonight, the NDP number is down on basically the same percentage of the total vote. The Liberal vote is far more efficient this time. It's up from 48 to 53. The Tory vote is way off, from 48 to 37. Having said that, the papers will tell you tomorrow that this was a good campaign and a pretty good night for Tim Hudak, a good night for the New Democrats, a rough night for the Liberals because they didn't get their 3rd consecutive majority, but they're still the government. And as a result, Dalton McGinty can say, "I'm adding my name to the list of every premier in the history of the province who's won 2, gone for a 3rd, and won it." There's something about that historical trend that works. Okay, a couple of more things we want to point out. You guys tell me in the control room when you want me to throw to those other ridings. But in the meantime, let me say that turnout was 42.4% tonight. Here's Norm Sterling. You wanted to know Eastern Ontario. Lisa MacLeod, she did smoke the opponent. 2-1 over Don Drainsfield in the P in Carleton. That's still a pretty safe Conservative seat and a very strong Lisa MacLeod seat.
Bodes well for her leadership. Are you convening that one?
And we did a program.
Clark.
We did in Brockville. We did a program that Steve Clark helped us out with in Brockville, and that's a huge 14,000 vote win over Ray Heffernan there. Steve Clark, another pretty good hockey player, Howard Hampton, I would say.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. He can put the puck in the net.
He sure can, and he did tonight in Leeds Grenville. That's of course Bob Runciman's old seat, which he held for almost 30 years.
I represented part of that area when I was first
did,
elected.
that's right. Yeah.
Carleton Grenville.
Okay, let's go to the tight races. Remember, there are still some races, even though we're here at 11:35. Letterman's about to come on, and still, we don't know the results of some of these ridings. York South Weston is still, with 6 polls to come, Is this too close to call?
I don't
Was-
think so
Not anymore?
No,
That's a Liberal win now.
I think so.
We'll give that.
I would have bet a good chunk of money that Paul would have taken that seat.
So what's the difference there? About 700 or so? That's a bigger win for her than she has won in the past.
Over 800.
Over 800.
I
okay.
suspect that what happened is some resources came from other ridings into that riding in the last
I
week.
think you're right. Okay, that's the race in York Southwest, and put that in the Liberal column. We have 6 polls to hear from in Perth Wellington, and it looks like John Wilkinson is going to lose.
Wow.
It's over.
That one is over. John Wilkinson, the Environment Minister, a potential replacement for Dalton McGinty. He got a lot of kudos for the good job he did implementing very tough policy, bringing in that HST. But he is part of the trend in rural Ontario tonight where Tories beat Liberals. And it would be nice to see the four-way on that one as well, just to see how many votes the NDP got there and whether that was a factor. Another tight race in Davenport. We still got 30 polls almost to hear from in Davenport. And it's still, is this too close to call now?
That's 34.
700 votes.
600.
Yep.
Yeah.
That one's going to, still 30 polls to hear from, so, but that one looks like it's a pretty, probably put a half a check mark beside the New Democrats in that
We
one.
don't do half check marks,
Oh,
Steve.
yeah, you're right. Kitchener Centre with still 22 polls to hear from, and John Malloy hanging on to a 400-vote lead over Dave McDonald. 400 votes, 20 polls. You could make it up, I guess, depending on where the polls are from. In Niagara Falls, Kim Crater with still 50 polls to hear from, so that's still way too early to call that one.
Yeah.
That's 400 votes difference, 440 votes difference. We're not going to call that one yet.
And that has a lot of different communities.
Northumberland, Quinte West. Look how Lou Rinaldi has come back. He was down by a much more substantial margin earlier. 10 polls to hear from. He's 600 down.
You won't make it up in 10
No,
polls.
I
You
don't
can't
think
make it
so.
up in 10 polls, can you?
No.
600 votes. That's a lot. So
That's-
probably put that one into the Conservative column. Well, let me tell you, folks, this has been one heck of a night here at TVO Central. On the agenda, we have seen really quite astonishing election returns. For the first time how long has it been, Jim? Since 1977, a two-term premier has won a third term. However, Dalton McGinty did not get the majority government he was seeking. He is, as the numbers below show, 1 seat short. However, even had he picked up that seat, the consensus around this table is, and I suspect in the province as a whole tonight, with by-elections, with these things that happen, it was as if it were going to be a minority government anyway. What it means is, and you know, we're going to talk about this. I'm sorry, I know it's a little quick to talk about this, but you guys are all talking about it behind the scenes and on your cell phones, so we're going to talk about it here. What it means is the race to succeed Dalton McGinty starts tonight.
Sure it does.
It does. And Monique Smith, as we look at 107 ridings across the province, there are still 4, 6, 8 to be heard from. 8 we can't nail down, but that's what the rest of it looks like tonight. The fact is, had the Premier won a majority tonight, he was going to be around for 2.5, 3 years and then leave. The fact that it's a minority government means that timetable's tighter, isn't it?
Well, I think it cuts both ways, though. I mean, Liberals are nothing if not pragmatic. And, you know, if we are looking at such a tight minority majority, we're going to need some stable leadership to, you know, weather the storms. And so I'm not sure that we would be so quick to jump to somebody new when we need to make sure that we've got the leadership in place to keep things moving forward. So, you know, I'm not totally convinced that the knives will be out or that people will be lining up for the leadership. I know my colleagues pretty well, my now former colleagues. I can now say I'm a former MPP.
Let's take a look at the total vote here, Monique, because the Liberals, last time out, got 2 million votes. They lost a lot of votes this time, folks. 1.4 million votes plus. That's 38% of the total vote.
But we've got 10%
Exactly.
less people voting. So your
Right.
core
Although-
numbers will be down.
But on a bigger population base.
Not that much bigger in 4 years.
Anyway, 38%, the exact same number the Liberals got under David Peterson in 1985. The Conservatives clock in at 35% tonight. Look at the difference in vote. I mean, it's a very small margin of difference, and yet, because of our first-past-the-post system, it's a 16-seat difference. And the NDP, up almost over 800,000 votes tonight, 23% of the total votes cast, just too short of 1985 as well. We keep referring to 85 because that's the last time we had minority government in the province of Ontario, and the Greens are down quite substantially. They lost more than half their votes tonight. I do want to pursue, Jim, with you, though, that notion of, does the race to replace the 24th Premier of Ontario start tonight?
If not tonight, probably tomorrow morning. I think it's, you even look at the places he didn't go. Several Liberal MPPs in Northern Ontario pretty much were left on their own and won it on their own. The places he spent the last several days of the campaign through Kitchener, Cambridge, for their Oktoberfest celebrations. They lost Cambridge, they're losing Pendergast and Kitchener-Conestoga. Malloy is that far from losing. He didn't seem to have coattails that did anyone much good.
Do you want to make the reference to the Malloy family dinner table and how it's going to be tomorrow night, given what happened in the next door riding?
Ooh, it's going to be a little
That's
grim.
a reference to the fact that Malloy and Leanna Pendergast are brother and sister-in-law, and that's going to be a tough family dinner if they both end up losing tonight.
You know what? I'm not so sure, notwithstanding what the Premier had said during the campaign and that kind of thing, that he wants to be the Premier for the next 4 years. I'm not so certain that his wife was all in tune with that, and his family and all the rest of it. So in some ways, this might give him a gracious exit if he wanted to utilize that.
Can you imagine him doing that?
Well,
Not
I
in
mean,
1,000 years.
What?
You mean- no.
I
Bowing
can't.
Bowing
out?
out?
No, I can't. No, I can't. But I do think that there'll be a lot of Liberals saying the best before date has passed. Because if you look ahead, if you look at how many seats the Liberals won, but they won by a very small margin, and those seats become riskier going forward. They especially become riskier going forward when we're headed into tough economic times, when I don't think the government's going to be able to keep their budget numbers. There's no way you can ratchet down health spending the way they project you can ratchet down health spending.
They did do it this year. They got health spending down to 3+% this year.
You can do it for 1 year. You can do it for 1 year.
Okay.
Okay. You can make the numbers look good, but going forward, that's impossible. And I think Norm will tell you how difficult it is, because the Conservatives really tried to ratchet down health spending, and it becomes a big political issue in just about every riding.
Half a dozen of the Liberals who won, too, are older gentlemen who
Yes, they are.
probably aren't going to be running next time, and there are going to be more seat vacancies up.
Yeah, but you can say the same for the Conservatives. Take
Yeah,
a look at the white hair.
yeah,
of
but they're going to step
Conservative
aside in
members.
seats that
They
they're
got
going to
some
win
new
by
blood tonight.
10,000 votes.
Tories got
They're
some
not
new
going
blood
to
tonight.
step aside when they can feel the bit coming.
53 Liberal seats tonight, friends. One short of a majority government. 37 Progressive Conservatives. That's up 12 from last time. 17 New Democrats. That's up 7 from last time. We have fixed election dates in the province of Ontario now. One thing we can almost certainly tell you, the next provincial election will not be 4 years from now. It will almost certainly be sooner than that. It is ironic that at a time in our political culture when we were supposedly so sick and tired of minority governments federally, we have chosen one provincially. Now, I know you can't vote for a minority government, but basically that's what the people did tonight. They voted for minority government. They didn't give Dalton McGinty the mandate he sought.
They were underwhelmed by all their options. You know, even the front page of the Toronto Sun, God strike me dead for mentioning it, today was Curly, Larry, and Moe. You know, the disdain for everything on the menu was...
Let's get, Stacey, let's get the leaders and the cabinet ministers.
I have to disagree. For New Democrats, okay, to jump up 7 seats, all right, almost double our totals,
Yep.
and finish very strongly in probably about 15 ridings, is really quite encouraging. I mean, I can almost say, you know, Bob Ray is truly gone. He is truly a Liberal now, and we don't have to carry him around.
But Howie, that's not the issue. The issue is how many people voted in total. 42%.
And I think people are election exhausted.
Well,
Election exhausted.
Folks, we're going to put up some numbers here. Let me just, because the Premier is close to speaking, and I want to get these in beforehand. If the race, and we're not saying it's going to be out in the open, obviously, but organizing will begin. If the leadership organizing is about to begin, who will be doing it? You can bet there will be people doing it on behalf of Deb Matthews, which was the name I heard more than any other over the past year. If this Premier falters, who is the most likely, most popular heir apparent? Liberal caucus members told me it's Deb Matthews. She's the health minister. She's had a lot of wins. Speaking of wins, there's another one. Kathleen Wynne almost certainly would kick the tires of a potential leadership bid, certainly on the basis of a 5,000 vote victory over the Progressive Conservative Party leader John Tory 4 years ago, and now a 12,000 vote victory almost over her Conservative challenger tonight, Andrea Mandel-Campbell. Kathleen Wynne will certainly be looking at the leadership. Let's see other potential contenders. Eric Hoskins, you'd have to think he'd have a look. He's 51 years old, highly regarded doctor, citizenship minister, wins his seat by landslides. This is twice now, a by-election and now the general election, right here in St. Paul's, riding in the middle of the city. How about Chris Bentley? Now, a lot of people have said Chris Bentley is kind of Dalton McGinty without quite as much personality, but having said that, he's a competent minister, Attorney General, London West, and is interested in the job. And the way I know he's interested in the job is that last time he came in here for an interview, he shook hands with all the cameramen and the floor director. Politicians don't do that unless they're running for something. Let's keep going. Dwight Duncan, Minister of Finance. I'm not sure he belongs on this list. Dwight Duncan has always said, when Dalton goes, I go. But he did run for the leadership against Dalton McGinty back in 1996 at Maple Leaf Gardens. And
That's beginning to seem another lifetime.
I think
It
that
is.
was his time.
that was his time, eh? Well, he may still be the Minister of Finance after tonight. Brad Douggood is a guy who may want to take a look at it. He's young, early 40s, represents a seat that obviously is very solid for the Liberals and for him. And he is a possibility, Brad Douggood. He may look at it. He's had the energy portfolio, one of the toughest that this government has had. So we'll see about that. Any more on this list? Well, it's not going to be John Wilkinson. We know that. John Wilkinson, whose brother Peter was the Chief of Staff to Dalton McGinty, retired earlier this year from that job. And now John, who had hoped on the strength of a victory tonight to keep himself in contention for a potential leadership bid. There are a lot of people talking him up. He has that nice kind of bridge between urban and rural in the province. He's got a nice manner about him. Did some very heavy lifting on the HST file. But he goes down to defeat in Perth Wellington tonight.
That bridge between urban and rural might be something we need, actually, looking at the urban-rural divide and a lot of these
It's a very divided
outcomes.
province now.
Yeah. And let's not forget the former mayor of Winnipeg, Glenn Murray, who ran federally and lost.
Not a chance.
You say not a chance he'll win, but
Oh, he'll
there's
run.
not a
He'll
chance
run. He'll run.
There's not a chance he won't kick the tires of this thing.
I've known Glenn Murray since 1984, and
imagine
he's always in to run.
He will get almost no caucus support at all, but he will look at this thing. That's for sure.
He'll get himself in trouble in the first week with the first tweet.
We put everybody on notice now that the Premier is minutes away from his, let's call it what it is, victory speech at the Chateau Laurier Hotel. He did win this election tonight. It wasn't as many seats as he had hoped for, but he did win. He is still the Premier. Here are cabinet ministers who lost their jobs tonight. Carol Mitchell going down in Huron-Bruce.
It's sad.
That's sad for sure.
Leona
Big loss.
Dombrowski, the
Big
education
loss.
minister, going down in Prince Edward Hastings. Been there since 1999 at the Ontario Legislature. The aforementioned John Wilkinson, the environment minister, going down in Perth Wellington.
Wilkinson's a big loss.
Yeah.
3 cabinet ministers losing in an election where the Liberals maintain power.
And
Sophia Agilinides, let's not forget about her on Hamilton Mountain. She lost her seat as well tonight on the mountain. She only won by 1,300 last time. I saw her at the TICAC game actually a few months ago, and I was having a chat with someone who shall remain nameless, and she and I were talking, this other person, and if she's watching, she knows who she is, and Sophia was sitting 2 seats over from us, and we both looked over at Sophia and we said, don't think so. Just NDP, the Horvath factor, looked too strong in the city of Hamilton that night.
Before the Premier comes on, is there any chance we can scroll through the 8 that are still in play?
Can we do that, guys? Check out the 8 that are still in play once again. There are 8 seats in the province so far that are still too close to call. Trinity Spadina in downtown Toronto was one of them. York Southwest and Paul Ferreira was trying to hang on there, but not sure that he's got a shot at it.
Burlington,
Do we have
Lemoyne.
anything updated here? We're still 28 polls away from having this one finished. Still a 500-vote lead for Jonah Shine and the NDP. It would be passing strange if Rosario Marchese guaranteed a victory in Davenport for the NDP, but lost his own Trinity Spadina seat, which he's held for 21 years. But we'll see about that. Let's see what other tight races we can pull up. Kitchener Centre. How's that one looking? 200, less than 200 votes. Even tighter.
10 more to come. Wow.
11 more
11 more to come.
11 more polls to come, and it's, is that ever tight? 131 votes.
Depending on what part of the city that's from.
Indeed.
That's right.
Niagara Falls, still too many polls to hear from. 50 polls still to hear from there.
400 or 500 votes part.
Yeah, that could be made up. Not going to
Yeah.
call that one yet either. Let's keep going. What other tight races do you want to look at tonight? Oh, that's it. Okay,
got
that's what we've
Burlington?
got so far. Burlington was 1,000 votes plus for the Conservative last time, so I think the Conservatives are going to hold on to Burlington tonight. The former regional chair of Halton, Joyce Savaline, was the
Yes.
former sitting member there. She stepped down after one term. New candidate there this time, and she looks set to hang on to that for the Progressive Conservatives this evening. Well, I'll tell you something. We all said this was going to be a cliffhanger at the beginning of the evening, and we weren't just whistling Dixie. This has been a really tight race tonight.
So how many are who's leading in the four with the four left? I think there's four left.
What's that, say again?
Who's leading in the four that are left?
Who's leading in the four that are left?
Yeah.
Well, that's where it is right now. We've got a Liberal leading in Kitchener Centre.
Yeah.
We'd have a Liberal leading in York Southwestern.
Yes, in New York Southwestern.
And we'd have, there's Rosario
There we
Marchese
go.
in
He's-
Trinity Spadina. Let's
yeah,
bring
he's
that one
rolling
up.
it up. He's rolling it up.
Yeah. Rosario Marchese, 900 votes up now on Sarah Thompson.
Still got 40 polls to go.
A lot of polls still to hear from, which is probably why we're not calling that one yet.
Yeah.
This Trinity Spadina riding is fascinating. There is, of course, a great ground game for the NDP in this riding, but there also have been literally thousands of new condominium units built in this riding over the last 4 or 5 years. The Liberal campaign believes that the people who bought those units are more of their traditional support base than, say, traditional NDP type support, folks who live in the annex, that kind of thing.
Rosario says they're all conservatives.
But that one is super tight. And Glengarry Prescott Russell, I think we can, 25 polls still to hear from there, and that one is 1,500 vote difference. I think we can put that one in the Liberal column?
It's pretty close.
I think we probably can.
But as you look at it now, the only one where the Liberals could get another seat would be from Rosario.
Right. That would be the only pickup, and that looks unlikely. The NDP margin of victory is increasing as the returns come in.
Keep in mind there's recounts as well. Like there sometimes are those small kinds of plays
What's
if
the
they're
rules
really
here?
close.
If it's 100 or less, it's an automatic recount? Is that the rule?
I think it's, 100
Something
or
like that?
80. We had one in our riding in the federal campaign. They are long and protracted
There's other
affairs.
ballots that I'm not sure what kind of numbers they are and whether they're in what we've received tonight or seen. And those are the mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
And the ones where people wrote in the names at the beginning.
I want to put a plug in here for a guy named David Lepofsky, who I think everybody around this table knows. He's a great advocate for the disabled in this province. He heads the Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance. I've got the name wrong. Ontario Disability Act of Ontario Alliance, something like that. And he was in here to do an interview not too long ago, and he pointed out the fact that he's blind, and he did vote in an advance poll with a machine that helps people who are visually impaired to vote. There are 144 of them around the province of Ontario. Today, if you're visually impaired, none of those machines, he emailed me earlier tonight, are available. They were only available in the advance poll, but not on the day of. And he thought there is still more work to be done on behalf of the disabled in this province.
I remember in 99 meeting with David to talk about getting our materials available for the visually impaired. So he's been at it a long time, making sure that campaigns are accessible to everyone.
Folks, I don't know if this is pathetic fallacy or what tonight, but the reason why the Premier at 8 minutes to midnight on election night has not spoken yet is because the power has gone out in the Chateau Laurier Hotel.
Oh, wow.
The lights are out on the Liberal campaign tonight.
Norm?
Well, it's my home.
Randy Hill
Stop
using
it.
Did you have anything to do with this, Norm
Where are
Sterling?
your wire cutters, Norm? Let's see them. I don't know how you got
I'm
there
in
back
Toronto.
so
I got an
fast.
alibi.
Exactly. Oh, you have friends.
One thing I think we can say at this stage, unless anybody around this table is in violent disagreement, is that it looks like, on the basis of the returns right now and who leads and who doesn't, that we are going to call a Liberal minority government for the province of Ontario. Dalton McGinty wins his third consecutive election, but after 2 majority governments, he is held to a minority this time. 53 Liberal seats. He is one seat short of a majority government. He will have to return to Queen's Park when the House reconvenes, which anybody get any idea when that would be?
Normally November.
Okay. He comes back, they'll have an election for the Speaker, probably one of the opposition members. You wouldn't, if you're the government, want to give up?
You have to entice one of them to run.
Right.
Yeah.
It's often better to...
There are a few with big enough egos
I
that
was going
want
to
to
say,
do
it's
it.
good. The Speaker is Steve Peters right now. He's still the Speaker, even though he didn't run again.
Yes.
But he's
Until
still the
the new one is
Speaker
elected.
until the new one is elected. And so they're going to do that.
Perks are nice with that job.
I tell you, great apartment at Queen's Park, a lot of travel.
Although a little spooky to live in.
I'm told the Scotch is very good.
How did you know that, Howard?
I was invited up once, only once.
Really?
Well, it'll be interesting to
Probably
see.
one
You
hockey
went
game.
uninvited quite often.
It'll be a much more dynamic place now, and I think it'll have a far better news value. It'll be interesting to see if the press gallery reverses the trends of ignoring the place and pulling reporters out.
So will we have enough reporters there to actually report on it?
Well,
drop it like flies.
maybe we can get back to covering that.
There's one of them right
Covering
there.
committees and not just leaders.
Yeah.
One of them right there, Greg Crone on that last one.
And maybe Steve will come back and visit us from
Hi
time
there.
to time.
Oh, I'm there all the time. Give me a break. Now,
like
one thing
having
we
you
haven't
back.
talked about here, with the Conservatives picking up so much of the total vote, they picked up 3% more of the total vote, they picked up 12 more seats tonight, but they are still nowhere in the 416. Jim, start us off here. What is wrong with the Conservative brand, with the Conservative message, that they were still, for the third consecutive election, unable to pick up one seat in the city of Toronto?
I guess there's that dissonance almost right out of the gate when the first week became about the foreign workers. That was anathema to people of urban sensibility and the demographic makeup of the city. And when it lapsed into homophobia toward the end, it's also furthermore anathema. I think it would be harder to elect a Hudak conservative in Toronto now than it was yesterday. That was where it was a bit tone deaf to me. You know, if they were to make gains in those broad swath of 905 seats and the city, but they acted as though they were running for mayor of some small town in Kansas. You know, it was a very odd approach toward making gains in places you're supposed to be courting.
Norm, why is your party still not making any gains in Toronto?
Well, I don't think they focused on urban issues, and they just don't. You know, they talk about all of these other issues that they deem important to their base, but they don't stretch themselves out to the issues which mean something to the people of Toronto and heavily densely populated areas.
I think the fact that they didn't make inroads in the, you know, given the times, given the forward nation, is actually that much more striking. I mean, you would think of any opportunity that they've had to make gains in Toronto, it would have been this time. But I think there's been a little bit of.
I think the Ford factor has reversed itself.
There is a backlash to the Ford factor.
Yeah, I mean,
It's exactly.
But there's also
Rob
the
Ford-
alignment of Rob Ford with Christine Elliott.
Rob Ford
he wasn't
promised-
coming out hard for Tim.
Rob Ford promised that he was going to look after people's pocketbooks, and I think that's really backfired in Toronto now. People are really worried about what's going to happen to fire services, police services, what's going to happen to libraries, and I think he became a real liability for Tim Hudak. In fact, I think he really became almost, you know, the sort of the poison piece. But I think there's something else to it, and I think Norm has hit on it. The Green Energy Act is very popular in Toronto, okay? It's not popular in rural Ontario. And I think Mr. McGinty really did pitch the campaign to go after those urban votes and those urban voters. And Mr. Hudak, through I think some unfortunate choice of words in the first week of the campaign, sort of fell into some things that he probably wishes he'd stayed out of. But there's a lesson to be learned from Stephen Harper on this. Harper first concentrated on 905 and won some seats in 905 and then was able to move into 416. I think the next election is going to be quite different in Ontario. The incumbency factor is not going to be as strong. I think many of the things that were set up as issues for the McGinty government going into this campaign may become negatives for them. I mean, you can't cancel 2 natural gas plants that are half built and not end up paying hundreds of millions of dollars of damages. And I think that's going to be on the horizon.
Unless they make an agreement with the company to move and build it somewhere else.
Then you've got sunk construction
Then
costs.
you've thrown away a lot of money.
And you
for
don't
sure.
build these things cheap.
Yeah. The other thing, you look at the things that Tim ducked, for your program on poverty issues here, they didn't even send a representative. At a lot of the all-candidates debates in Toronto, when it was about education, which in the 416, it's like mother bears and their cubs. Sure. They weren't even sending their candidates to debates. It's as though they were just blind to what was of interest to the city.
Well, even in rural areas, they didn't come to the education debate. They in the riding next to me, Greyburstone Sound, they didn't show up. Like for the poverty debate, there was definitely an avoidance of issues, and I think that made people not want to trust them.
You've got to remember, though, that when you're a caucus of 25 or 15 or whatever it is, your resources are very much limited. And I think the great part of tonight is he's got 12 more members. He's going to have a lot more money in research, and he's going to learn from the lessons from this particular election. I think that, and we have some very, very strong people on education: Elizabeth Whitmer, Sylvia Jones, Christine Elliott.
Frank Cleese, I debated on education in 2007.
Christine Elliott. So I mean, all they have to do is.
I think they let teachers representatives go to their fundraisers, even if they tried to buy a ticket and go and talk to a conservative, they wouldn't let them in. I mean, they were just absolutely shunning the education sector.
Norma, I think I think Monica's right. The Tim Hudak conservatives still have some hangovers from the Mike Harris conservatives, and I think they've got, if they want to move on from here, they've got to devise some strategies to deal with it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
One of the things,
I don't agree that I just believe it was a lack of resources and seniority in terms of the back part of the campaign. I think you needed a more wisdom and age.
Were you lacking a little eminence grise over there? You got Deb. She's got some good there.
I think one of the things that we're still waiting for, where are we here? It's almost tomorrow. It's midnight, and the Premier has not spoken yet. The numbers have not moved in about an hour, but there are still 4 extremely close races where the Liberal is still potentially in contention. And the suspicion is that Dalton McGinty doesn't want to give his speech at the Chateau Laurier Hotel in Ottawa, where he has given 3 speeches already. 1999, 2003, 2007.
You mean he turned out the lights?
I'm not making any speculation about who pulled the plug at the Chateau Laurier. But the fact of the matter is, there's the shot. Everybody's dancing. Or something, clapping, waiting to go. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. McGinty potentially gives a different speech at 53 seats than he does with 54 seats.
Yes.
And because 54 is a majority, obviously. So my hunch is he's going to wait for that Trinity Spadina return to finish. He wants to know if Sarah Thompson's in his caucus. If Sarah Thompson's in his caucus, he gives a different speech. If Rosario Marchese returns to Queen's Park, he gives a different speech.
At that point, though, is anybody there listening?
We're still here.
It'll be like the speech he
We're
gave
still
when he
here.
won the leadership.
That's right.
My mom's still watching. The gang in North Bay are still watching, having their hammy sammies and, hanging in there. So, yeah.
I think in the interests of sort of fair play and equal time, we did point out earlier in the evening that Mr. McGinty obviously sits on a razor-thin government right now, but he also may be in the leadership campaign to replace him may be starting, as Jim Coyle suggested, tomorrow morning. Having said that, let us look back at the trajectory of this guy's career. This was a guy who was elected in 1990. He was the one new Liberal MPP elected in what was a debacle for the Liberals that year. They lost 50, 60 seats. Bob Rae took over as the Premier of Ontario. David Peterson, the Premier, lost his own seat. The one new guy in that Liberal caucus was Dalton McGinty. I can remember having lunch with him shortly after that in 1990, and I asked him what his plans were, and I swear he said to me, "I have plans to lead this party someday." And to me, it was a shocking thing to say, given that he'd been elected for all of 3 months when he said it. But 6 years later, he was the leader. And he was in 4th place on that first ballot. And a worse fourth on a second ballot. And at the end of the night, at 4:30 in the morning, on the 5th ballot, he was the leader of the Liberal Party.
And wasn't that a fun convention?
It was, actually.
4 o'clock in the morning.
It
We
was
were
a
having a
great
great
convention.
time.
He has a framed quote from Calvin Coolidge over the executive toilet in the Premier's office, and it's a quote speaking to the merits of persistence, that genius and brilliance and talent don't necessarily guarantee success, but persistence is the only thing that does. And if anything defined Dalton in a word, it was that. He just kept working, and kept getting better and better and better.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people who, questioned him in '96, and that's why he was on 4th on the ballot. And
one caucus member backed him, I think.
came around, but a lot of people came around.
And it was Tony Ruprecht.
Oh, God.
Well, Greg Sorbera backed him in that campaign as well, but he was not in
He
caucus at
wasn't
the
in
time.
caucus then, yeah.
But he did back him. And Tim Murphy backed Dalton as well, I think, in that campaign as well,
I
although...
don't think Tim was with Dalton at the beginning.
That was
I saw him with a button on.
that was the anyone but Gerard Kennedy. Right?
Anyone but Gerard Kennedy, anyone but Joe Cordiano, anyone but Dwight Duncan.
I guess
they
he's
couldn't agree among the
settling
three.
for 53, isn't he?
There he goes.
Well, here he comes.
He's coming along. Yay!
Now this will, this is going to be an interesting speech, folks, because on the one hand, he won. On the other hand, he's 1 seat shy of a majority government, and I guess he's entering the hall right now because he's satisfied that Sarah Thompson is not going to win in Trinity Spadina. That she's
Count had her
down
back
1,100?
Yeah, 1,100.
Down 1,100, so that means the NDP will almost certainly hold on to that seat in Trinity Spadina. And that means there's the Premier, his wife Terry behind him, his daughter Carleen right behind him is there as well.
And the boys.
And the boys, the 3 boys.
Liam, Jamie, and Connor. I was traveling with Connor once when I was working for Dalton, and he said to me, driving in the car, you know, and he looks at me and he goes, "Did you support my dad in the leadership?" That's when you want to turn the radio up. I just said,
Who did you support?
I was actually with Gerard at the beginning. Yeah, actually, in the end. Actually, I was neutral through the campaign, and I went to Gerard in the end. But yeah, Connor and I worked it through. We were all good at the end. So they're great kids, great kids.
Well,
I've done really well.
I know the Premier said last time, I think his first words last time were, "Thank you, Ontario. Those are the first words of the next 4 years." I wonder what the kind of soundbite will be as he starts his speech here. He'll also, no doubt, at some point thank his family. And the line he used last time, which again I thought was quite memorable, was, "As great as this victory is tonight, there is nothing I am prouder of in the world than being father to you 4 kids." The McGintys are an amazing family. Dalton McGinty, if you don't know, is the oldest son in a family of 10 children. He's got some funny stories to tell about driving the family down to Florida for their annual vacations. How they all pulled into that van, all 12 of them, I'll never know. Not everybody had a seatbelt on.
today.
No, you couldn't do it today. Not everybody had a seatbelt on, that's for sure. His slogan 4 years ago was "Moving Forward Together." This time they took the moving away. It was just "Forward Together." Same slogan, incidentally, Richard Nixon used in 1968. Worked pretty well for Nixon in '68. Didn't work as well for Dalton McGinty in 2011. He's at the podium. Let's hear from the 24th Premier of the province of Ontario. Still the Premier of Ontario. Not a majority government tonight, but he's still the Premier. Dalton James Patrick McGinty, Jr.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. My friends, it's time to move forward together. Forward together with an Ontario Liberal government. And while we may not know for several days what the final results will be in all the ridings, we have succeeded. We have, in fact, succeeded in our goal of electing an experienced Liberal government. And we move forward together with a positive plan to keep Ontario on track and growing stronger. Nous irons de l'avant ensemble afin d'améliorer l'éducation, parce que l'éducation constitue les fondations d'une économie prospère dans notre monde extrêmement concurrentiel. Nous allons aller de l'avant ensemble afin de procurer des soins de santé de qualité à chaque Ontarienne et à chaque Ontarien, parce que nous avons besoin que chacune et chacun d'entre nous puisse donner son meilleur. We will move forward together to make education even stronger, because that's the foundation of a dynamic economy in today's highly competitive world. Forward together to ensure quality health care is there for every Ontarian, because we understand we are in this together, and we need every single one of us at our very best. And forward together to build a strong economy that attracts the investment we need, because that generates the ideas and makes the products the world is clamoring to buy, and that delivers the high-quality, high-paying jobs that our families so rightly deserve. My friends, it's time to move forward the Ontario way. The Ontario way is not about cutting people loose in difficult times or dividing our province according to where we came from or how long we've been here. It's about working and building together. It's about being there for each other in the good times and in the not-so-good times. The Ontario way is not about wishing the world was the way it used to be, or throwing up barriers that can't possibly stand up to the wave of change sweeping the world. It's about turning our challenges into opportunities by believing in, investing in, and trusting in our people, so that together we can take on the world and win. And the Ontario way is not about giving in to defeatism or negativity or cynicism in the face of uncertain times. Instead, it's about building a bright future with positive ideas, enthusiasm, and hope. You know, even a few weeks ago, we were being told that we had no chance of success. We were being counted out and written off, but we didn't listen to the naysayers. We listened instead to Ontarians. And Ontarians have said to us tonight, let's move forward together, and let's do it the Ontario way, and the Ontario Liberal Party is the best party to lead us there. So I say, we say to our fellow Ontarians tonight, you've given us a tremendous responsibility, one we will cherish and honor. We will serve you faithfully in provincial parliament. To every Ontarian who voted today, for any candidate of any political stripe, I say thank you. We live in a world where some people are struggling, even giving up their lives for the kind of freedoms we enjoy here in Canada. So when you cast a ballot, you do more than choose a local candidate to represent your interests. You validate the sacrifices being made the world over in the name of democracy. To everyone who stood for office in this election, I salute you. Your commitment to public service has made our great province stronger. And those who take on positions of leadership are asked to give up the most, including privacy and precious family time. I want to congratulate Andrea Horvath and Tim Hudak and their families for standing up for what they believe in and for fighting hard in this campaign and in the legislature. To the voters of Ottawa South, I say, thank you. To those voters in particular, in my riding, I say thank you so very much. It's a great honor for me to serve as MPP for the people I've known for so long and respect so very much. For 24 years, you've elected a McGinty to represent you at Queen's Park. And I'm daily... And I am daily reminded of my dad's words of advice. The true reward of public service is to be found in the service itself. Now, to my mother. Thanks, Mom, for keeping all us kids on track, except for me. I know, and this is true, you wanted me to be a doctor. Thanks for settling for a premier. To To my 9 brothers and sisters, and especially my brother Brendan, who was with me again on this campaign every step of the way. Even when his baby boy was born, I say thank you. And to Carlene, Dalton Jr., Liam, and Connor, the apples of my eye, kids who went from playing campaign in our sandbox to helping out as young adults on this one and leading their own full lives. Thank you for all your love and support. I am very, very proud of you. Thank you. And your mother is especially proud that in spite of all the politics in the family, you turned out okay. And to Terry, the love of my life, thanks for everything. From saying yes when I asked you to marry me, to saying yes when I said I wanted to be leader of our party, to saying yes when I told you I wanted to keep going because the work we still have ahead of us may be the most important work of all. Terry and I were high school sweethearts. Long ago, we talked about how we would lead quiet, private lives together. Well, our lives have not been that quiet or all that private, but we are together, and that's what counts. And finally, to my Ontario Liberal family, which is almost as big as the McGinty family, to a tremendous team of candidates who worked long and hard and with incredible energy and integrity, including those who won't be joining us in the legislature this time, but will always be a valued part of our team, to our revamped and revitalized caucus, women and men dedicated to their constituents in our province, and to the incomparable Greg Sobera, the brilliant Don Guy, and a veritable dream team of staff and volunteers who blanketed the province with our positive message 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I say to you all, because of you, my friends, liberalism in this great country of ours is alive and well and living in Ontario. Sometimes when you start out to make a difference, you end up making history. And that's inspiring. For our party, this is exciting. For historians, it will be interesting. But for Ontario families, what's important are the challenges and opportunities before us. My friends, it's important that we be sober-minded about the message Ontarians have sent us tonight. Les Ontariennes et les Ontariens nous ont dit: nous vous accordons notre confiance, mais nous vous demandons de travailler encore plus fort, d'être à notre écoute plus que jamais auparavant, et de donner chaque jour le meilleur de vous-même. Ontarians are telling us, we are placing our trust in you, but we expect you to work even harder. Listen more than ever, and give us nothing but your best every day. But most of all, we demand that you lead, because we are Ontario, and that's what we do. We lead. The times may be uncertain, but we are brave. The choices ahead won't be easy, but we are bold. Every single one of us wants to compete, but we know that none of us is as strong or smart as all of us pulling in the same direction, because we are Ontario. We're proud of how far we've come and proud to have emerged from a tough time, even stronger for the experience. But we always look to the future. We work hard to succeed today, but most of all, just like our parents and grandparents before us, we will do whatever it takes to build a bright future for our children and grandchildren, because we are Ontario. And Ontarians never stop moving forward, and neither, my friends, will we. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's Dalton McGinty, 24th Premier of Ontario, giving what he would like to characterize as a victory speech. He said, "We succeeded in re-electing an experienced Liberal government." The crowd suggested 4 more years, 4 more years. Probably not going to happen. These numbers suggest that we're certainly not 4 years away from our next provincial election, much likely less than that. It's a minority government for the Liberals tonight. Dalton McGinty becomes yet another Premier of Ontario. In fact, every Premier of Ontario who's won twice to win a third time. Didn't win the majority he wanted. He's 1 seat short. But let's talk about that speech just for a few minutes here. Howard, you've been in that situation where you've been the leader of a party. You've led your party to an evening that didn't go quite as strongly as you wanted to. Your job at that moment is to put on a brave face and tell the folks that there's a tomorrow. How did he do?
Well, I think the Premier did well. I thought it was a good speech, and you know, obviously you talk about the successes of the evening, but I suspect that people won't be as happy in the back room. I mean, this is a government that's going to have to make some very, very tough decisions in the months and weeks ahead, and it'll be very difficult to make those decisions in a minority situation. You wear it all.
Norm Sterling, how did he do?
I thought it was a great speech. I mean, he's polished now. He's been the Premier for 8 years and the Leader of Opposition for 4. I thought he did a good job. You know, he said in Ottawa and with his family and that kind of thing, and still portraying, you know, Premier Dad as he has in the past. I agree with Howard. The big problem we have now is with this financial crunch we have, he's going to be into budget decisions, budget votes, and he's going to have to do a lot of negotiating, which they haven't had to do in the past in order to get those particular budget matters passed and dealt with. I mean, and there's going to be some difficult negotiations with the public service unions.
I thought he did great. I was in that room 12 years ago, standing at the back of the hall, and it certainly wasn't as happy a night as it is tonight. It is a victory speech. I mean, you know, it's a minority, but it's a victory, and we have 17 more seats than the next guy, and 3 times as many as the NDP. We have a great caucus, lots of great people to step forward and become cabinet ministers, and you know, he was incredibly polished, gracious as always. Very professional, strong, steady hand to lead us into difficult economic times. Exactly as he was billed in the campaign. That's what he presented tonight, and that's what he'll continue to do, I'm sure.
Victoria.
Well, from a point of view of being a Toastmaster, he's got impeccable timing. He delivers his speech where he's really connecting with people, uses personal images and discussions. He tells stories really well. Like he's a great leader. From that kind of perspective, and it was an appropriate kind of speech for what he needed to do. He will have a difficult time, and I bet that within the next couple of years that he'll step down for a leadership contest within the Liberals, because they're going to need a fresh face if they want to be able to continue on being the government in Ontario.
We do have to remember he's been a member of the provincial legislature for 21 years now. It doesn't show on his face, it doesn't show in his hair. I think we remember David Peterson and Bob Rae aging in this office in a way that this guy hasn't. It's really quite striking. The jokes are all over the campaign trail about there's some picture in some bedroom upstairs in the attic that's getting older. Well, this guy doesn't seem to get much older looking. Jim Coyle, the speech, what'd you think?
He's utterly comfortable in his own skin now, and he utterly believes in the course he's plotted. You know, there's that sort of comfort level. It was interesting to me, there were a couple of things. He did sort of cite a couple of the uglier aspects of the campaign when he said this is not about judging Ontarians by how long they've been in the country, and it's not about looking back to the world the way we wished it would stay, which to me were plainly taking on Hudak again. There was an interesting line about liberalism as alive and well and living in Ontario, as though there was some sort of nervousness or fear that it mightn't be at the end of the night. There was almost a little bit of relief in that. And he did urge his colleagues to be sober-minded, was his term, about the message Ontarians had sent. He didn't really expand on that much more than saying they wanted people to work harder. I think it's hard to know, given the numbers of the voters and the spread of the votes, what message Ontarians sent, but obviously he'll be studying on that. But I think there was kind of a soberness beneath a lot of the boilerplate positive lines that we've all heard often.
The percentage of the turnout, incidentally, is nudging its way north. We're now at 46.5%. 46.5% voter turnout, with 96% of the polls reporting. The job of Dalton McGinty, I mean, clearly everybody tonight, and here's the last tight race. I think they've all been called now with the exception of this one. And this one's still with, we've still got almost 30 polls, 25 polls to hear from. 800 votes. I mean, that's probably enough, right? That's probably enough. But anyway, I was going to say...
Well, I think what's interesting is if you look at the splits between the Conservatives and Liberals, it's not as if any of the polls look like they're going to go to one candidate or the other. I think Kim Crater's lucked out tonight.
Lucked out. He's going to go back, you mean?
He'll go back, and he'll go back because of the split.
Obviously, all of the leaders are trying to frame in their speeches what they want Ontarians to take out of this message tonight. Tim Hudak did better tonight. There was a lot of hoopla at his campaign headquarters. Andrea Horvath did better tonight. There was a lot of hoopla at her campaign headquarters. Clearly, the mood at the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa would not have been as buoyant tonight as it would have been in the previous two elections. It's the job of this guy to let the troops know that, we're still in charge. We're not done. We've got more work to do. How do you do with that?
I think he hit the right tone. I think people, there are those who harken back to '85 and who understand what minorities are all about, and will actually be kind of excited at the game that lies ahead. They do make for interesting governing and government, and so I think that there are some in the room who are looking forward to that. Certain people who've put their heart and soul into it, wanted a majority. It's all part of the game, right? I mean, those of us who've been in this, well, some of us all our lives, know that there are good nights and there are not so good nights and there are great nights.
Which one's this?
This is a good night. Yeah, still a good night.
Okay, still, we got a few minutes left to go here. Stacey, tell me, where do you want us to go now? Have we got the maps available? Go to maps. Good. Okay, let's do this right now. We want to show you how the province has changed between 2007 and 2011. There was the 416 at dissolution, 23 ridings. 4 New Democrat ridings south of Bloor Street, and that's the situation tonight. That one riding, that's Davenport, I guess, still up in the air, undecided. Could go either way, probably going NDP.
They just declared him elected.
Yeah,
they did? Okay.
Yeah.
905 at dissolution, red and blue, and now with one little patch of orange in there for the NDP. That's Jagdeep Singh, Bramalea Gore Malton. Central Ontario at dissolution, bit of red, bit of blue, almost all blue tonight. Keep going, Michael. East at dissolution, split between the Tories and the Liberals. A lot more blue tonight. Where's the next region of the province? Hamilton-Niagara, split quite evenly among the three parties. What happened in the Hamilton-Niagara tonight? One still up for grabs. That's Niagara Falls, although Kim Crater looks like he's got that. A little less red. The Northeast at dissolution. Still no Tory seats up there, although there's one tonight. One Tory seat, one Liberal seat, the rest goes NDP. Next region of the province, in the Northwest, split between the NDP and the Liberals. A little more orange in that picture tonight. The Liberals were losing seats all over the province. The Southwest at dissolution, all red and blue. Now we've got a couple of patches of orange, a lot less red, and a lot more blue. These maps really do indicate what happened across the province of Ontario tonight. Guys, I want to thank you. It is almost 12:30 a.m.
Do we get
the
paid
next
overtime?
day.
Yeah.
Your shop steward can negotiate.
Has-beens now.
The shop steward can negotiate
At
for
12
overtime.
midnight, we're has-beens.
Thanks, everybody.